29. Consider action items discussed in closed session for personnel recommendations. The principal at Peters Colony. Would somebody like to make a recommendation or motion?
Yes, Ms. Cox, I move to approve Ms. Rebecca Chirinos as principal of Peters Colony Elementary School as recommended by Administration and Personnel Selection Committee.
Thank you, Ms. Prosnick. That's a motion by Ms. Prosnick. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Lazan. All in favor? 7-0, motion carries. All right, Ms. Rebecca. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
It's an exciting night for LISD and principals. So we have the principal of Rockbrook Elementary. Would someone like to make a motion? Mr. Miller?
Yes, Madam Cox, I move to approve Mr. Patrick Guy as principal of Rockbrook Elementary School as recommended by administration and a personnel selection committee.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. That's a motion by Mr. Miller. Do we have a second? Second by Ms. Hassett. All in favor? All right, that's 7-0. Motion carries. Mr. Guy.
Tracy and Rochelle.
Welcome to LISD.
Congratulations, Mr. Guy. Looking forward to having you at LSD. And now we have our principal at Downing Middle School. Would someone like to make a motion?
I'll make that motion.
I move to approve Mr. Curtis Martin as principal of Downing Middle School as recommended by administration and a personnel selection committee. Mr. Martin.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second, Ms. Sills. All in favor? That's 7-0. Motion carries. Mr. Martin.
A Downing graduate. Alumni. Are you an alumni? Yeah. Or just a former student? It's gotta be something. All right. 3 girls.
My middle daughter, Macy, my youngest daughter, Riley, my son, Nick, who is a Downing graduate.
Woo!
A long time.
Very nice. Oh, maybe.
Okay, the interview team are ladies. Come on up.
Diamondback. That must have been some interview. Oh my gosh, I love the head.
You now know everything there is.
No.
Congratulations, Mr. Martin.
Maybe it was duct tape.
You need to have a ladder.
All right, Dr. Rapp, you're going to lead us off with a vision statement. And
Yes, happy to do that. Our vision and mission statement, of course, is on our agenda as always. Our I statement for this evening is, I will create and foster a safe learning environment that encourages risk-taking. And I wanted to share for this I statement that recently at Learning Leaders, we awarded our Culture Champion certificates, as we do every month. And one of the schools that we highlighted as a culture champion had their teachers submit I statements that they were working on. And I wanted to read you one of the reflections that they had about what they're doing this school year. I've worked very hard this year to let students know that it is okay to be wrong, that it is okay to fail, and that it is okay to not be perfect. I think that some of these students get so caught up in trying to be perfect that it leads them to anxiety and depression, among other issues. I purposely make mistakes to show them how to fix them and that it is okay. My students know that they are loved and significant in my classroom, and despite the fact that they're coming to a math class, they are excited to be there. So, thank you for that this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Rapp. Discussion items going into communications. Mrs. Brown?
Okay, so we put this on the agenda to give us a chance to talk about the banquet venue, let y'all ask questions, and us provide you information in preparation for next week when it'll actually be an agenda item where we're seeking approval. Just as a reminder, in January, we presented you with an agenda item to narrow the field down to these two that we're considering tonight, which is the Embassy Suites and the DFW Hyatt. And it was great that we did it that way from on the back end because it allowed us to negotiate between those two hotels, which I think ended up with a better deal for whichever way we go. So just to give y'all a little bit of background before you ask questions and have your discussion. After we negotiated between the two venues, the cost is now basically the same. It's about $90,500 for the Embassy Suites and about $93,000 for the Hyatt, which is a little bit less than what we've paid previously. And of course, the final cost of that will vary a little bit just because RSVPs and how this year we had, I think, about 60 retirees, and that, as you can imagine, bumps up the people who are coming. And then just a couple of other pieces of information for you guys. We measured from this location, and the Hyatt is about 6 miles closer than the Embassy Suites. We've sent out a survey just to the attendees, the staff attendees last week. About 130 people have responded, which is not a huge amount of people, but it's in line with what we typically get. And 91% said the location was convenient for them, and 97% overall had a favorable opinion of the banquet itself. And just kind of background for y'all, we've been very happy with the Hyatt's customer service leading up to all of this. They've done a great job addressing concerns that we have. Obviously, we don't have that experience with Embassy Suites. I can tell you in the negotiation, one thing that we felt like with the Embassy Suites is it seems like we've been talking to different people every time we talk to them. And so that has kind of hampered some of the conversation. So those are just some background pieces for y'all. And then I know that y'all have questions and comments, so I'm happy to answer anything that y'all may want to know in addition.
And board, we are very aware, and Amanda and I, visited as recent as earlier today. I mean, this is y'all's event. I mean, you're the official host, so we understand that. So we'd love to answer whatever questions and then hopefully move forward next week. We don't really do we have to move forward as far as time frame? Are we in a time frame?
Springtime availability starts getting hard to get the dates that we want.
I thought so.
And going much earlier makes it hard on the campuses to get all the teacher of the year finalists and all that stuff finalized. Going much later, then y'all know how crazy it is right now. If you have kids in school, we can't find a night to do things right now. So it's the longer we wait, the more challenging it is to get favorable dates for us. Okay. So that would be the only consideration on that. We have also talked to both of these groups about the possibility of, if we lock in for 2 years for a specific venue, would they be willing to honor next year's pricing for both years? And that's something that we can negotiate and take to the table if y'all are interested in, awarding a 2-year or more to one venue. So that would be another thing that is kind of something that we floated to them and they were open to.
Okay.
Ms. Prosnick?
So what dates are we looking at? Because there were no dates in the...
So we have, for the Embassy Suites, it was May 1st. And again, it may have even changed since we talked to them. You just don't know what else is coming down the pike. The Hyatt was April 17th, which is a little earlier than what we've done, but we still feel like April, mid to late April and early May is kind of the sweet spot for getting that done.
So are those the only dates that they had available?
In that general time frame, yeah. And again, people could back out, all that stuff is in flux because it's a year out, but that's what they could tell us at that moment.
Okay, because that just really, I think that backs us into a corner as far as that time frame goes, et cetera. I will say, the last time we talked about this, I had mentioned getting corporate sponsors. Is that something that we're looking at?
Dr. Rogers and I have discussed that, and we've actually done a little bit of research with other school districts on how they do it. And what we found is it varies from district to district, how they approach it, whether they do it or not, where they hold their banquets. Some people literally hold it in their boardroom and have cheese and crackers. Like there's a wide variance of what our surrounding school districts do. We found that Plano and Frisco have a pretty robust system in place, but they do it as part of kind of a larger package, kind of what we're trying to develop with the LEF to say, okay, here are all the things we're seeking sponsorships for the year. Frisco and Plano both had a good system in place so that corporate sponsors could see the wide array of things that they could sponsor. And so that would be something that we could work on moving forward if that's something that, that the board wants.
So we could include that, if you will, on the list.
I think that would be something that we could discuss with the foundation to see if that fit with what their parameters are, and then if they didn't feel like that was something they could do, we could explore the other options. The flip side for us is, obviously, if you guys have a sponsor that you feel like would be a great sponsor for that, or a group of sponsors, that would be something we would love to know. We also feel like any money we pull for the banquet could be money that we're taking out of the hands of another worthwhile LISD event like back to school or any of the other things that we seek big sponsorships for. So for us, it's finding that balance between, where do we want that limited pool of money to go? And are there sponsors that may be interested in doing a banquet that may not want to do something else that we haven't explored yet? The other piece of that, I think, would be then how much does that become the sponsor's banquet as opposed to the board's banquet? How much face time do they want? How much advertisement do they want as part of their willingness to sponsor? And those are all things I think that you guys would have to weigh. What at the end of the day, what's the most important piece for you guys as a board?
Fair enough. That's all.
Ms. Hassett.
With the current timeline, are we going to miss those two opportunities in April 17th and May 1?
They could be booked tomorrow. It's hard for us to know because anybody could come along at any point and request those dates.
What happens if we select one and they're no longer available?
I think, we would have to go back to them if we're leaning one direction or another. We would have to go back to them and try to solidify, this week to say our intent is to seek board approval for you, what dates are available. And then typically they've been willing to hold it for us until we get board approval if we can kind of let them know this is what's coming down the pike. In the Hyatt, we've got a group that wants to earn our business and we've got a group that wants to keep our business. So we're in a good spot, about as good a spot as we can be to negotiate. But yeah, we would have to go and find out if anything has been booked at this point.
I like the idea of asking them for a 2-year agreement on the terms. So that's a really great idea.
Okay.
So, thank you. Madam Administrator.
Thank you. Yes, and I thought I remembered seeing that they're refurbishing at the Hyatt, so it's going to be a whole new look, which is really nice.
Right.
So it'll be just like a brand new hotel. And you're right. At the other one, I do know there's been some staffing changes which can affect those working relationships. So I do think that's important. I love the idea of looking at what Frisco and Plano do because I think it is important that we're not taking money away from the backpacks, for our students getting back to school program where the sponsors can then say what they want to sponsor. But you're right. I think the board would have to decide, is this going to become more like a business where then the sponsors are speaking regularly? And I think that's something we have to say. But I do like the idea of including all the options for our business.
And as far as sponsorships, the way that we previously, a long time ago, there were door prizes for, there may be $1,000 door prize, 10 or 15 years ago. You had every business was chiming in to give money for that. And that kind of dwindled. And then whenever I started, we looked at, we were having a principal get $1,000 and the custodian was getting no dollars. And we felt like working with the foundation to address giving our award recipients a little bit of a cash prize was a good way to kind of use some of that sponsorship money that they may be able to go and get because it was, $4,000 or $5,000. So in the grand scheme of the banquet budget, that wasn't that much, but to give all of our our custodian of the year a $250 prize, or our bus driver of the year a $250 prize, that's kind of where we funneled the limited sponsorship that was still available for the banquet at that time.
But I really still appreciate, though, because I don't want to take away from it. And I can say personally, in the involvement I'm in, across the board, sponsorship dollars are down in every single group that I'm involved in. And so I think 15 years ago, there weren't as many nonprofits as there are now. And it really is hard to stretch that dollar across all the opportunities.
Ms. Sells.
Well, I probably violated our no technology at the table law, but our law policy. But I did at 6:43 waved to those two locations, which would be about the time that, it's a little late. I should have done it about 6:30 when we started opening the cheese and crackers. But the Hyatt was 17 minutes and the Embassy Suite was 29 minutes. So it's almost a double. And I think that for me, I just want to make sure that the location is still viable for everyone in the district. And I know from the location that I come from, I leave my house, I have to make one of two choices. I don't have between those two choices any real variance. And so if I'm on 35 and the bridge shuts down, I hope you all enjoy the evening because I'm probably not going to make it.
But you're talking Embassy Suites, correct?
Embassy Suites, yeah, in Denton. So that's my only concern is that if I'm headed to the airport, I can get off on airline, I can get off on Freeport and come in back way. There's half a dozen or more available ways to get there from across the district. And so that would be just my only concern in that. So, and I think that, I stayed a little longer than y'all did this year at the Hyatt, and I will tell you that I was very pleased with my service and everything, and it seemed, and I'd stayed there before, and it had increased in quality very much. So, just FYI.
And what about the 2 year?
I'm all for a 2-year.
Okay.
I think if we can make that a negotiation, and then it only gives us more power, I believe, at the end of the 2 years to say, hey, you know what, we're going to negotiate this again, and this is a 2-year gig for you.
Right.
Because the time that they spend on employee talent and yearly trying to resell you,
Sure.
it's done.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
okay.
Mr. Miller?
So this is multidimensional for me, and I think Catherine brings up a great point. If you're coming from that direction up 35, there are some options, right? You can get to the Embassy Suites without taking the bridge, but here's and I think that the issue we had the other night was 6:30, getting there at 5 or 6:30 on a Friday night, which is the worst time ever to go to the airport on a Friday night. And so, if you miss the little exit into the hotel parking, like you miss it again, you're backed up in traffic. I think when we look at the cost of this, we're looking at our cost and not the employee cost, right? So I was given a valet ticket. When I put the valet ticket, the parking ticket, I put it in the wind ticket, blew it out. I'm like, okay, no problem. I got a toll tag. I already paid $5 for the valet. Charge my toll tag $12. That's $17 for me, and I make a little more than most teachers do probably. So there's an element here of what it costs our employees to go. And I would venture to say that actually employees would drive a little farther, 10 or 15 minutes farther, if they didn't each have to pay the parking and that type of thing. That's just my opinion, and it's probably something we haven't surveyed them on. The parking is not an issue, and by the way, getting out after the event is an issue, right, with the parking. So there's a major logistical issue going in and a major logistical issue going out. And there is the imposition of cost on our employees that exists at the Hyatt that doesn't exist at the other location. I think that needs to be weighed heavily. I'm for a 2-year agreement. I think we need to stop tapping the foundation. If someone, and by the way, I think we had some sponsors for the convocation, right? So we can have sponsors for an event that don't use that as an opportunity for mingling. They're doing it for investment. And so we have a whole nother partnerships arm within the district that could be looking at businesses that could be partnering with us on this event. And by the way, if I was looking at partnerships, I'd be looking at partnerships that teachers might see as beneficial in the community. I don't know what that is, right? Where they buy groceries or a Market Street type thing, or, you know, I mean, there's a whole other set of partnerships there that I think we can tap into and not just rely on the foundation. To Rhonda's point, it is pretty heavily tapped, and we do have a lot of people that give monetary awards to the employees, especially as we get in the $250 up to $1,000 range. I lean towards the Embassy Suites because it really has, while it's longer, and I don't want to diminish or disparage the relationship with the Hyatt, it is logistically difficult, and it puts a lot more cost on our employees. And I would venture to say, by the way, that some of those principals to get their employees there probably do some reimbursement on some of the parking. There's no way for us to go back and fully vet that.
Mr. Miller, I believe that the parking was all validated.
Only if you valet is their cost on the parking.
Yeah.
Okay, so there was
So
no
the
all
parking
validated.
doesn't cost otherwise.
Okay.
No.
It's
There
still a
was-
logistical nightmare to get in and out. There's no doubt about it.
That's why we specifically asked the question about the location on the survey, because we didn't want to just say, hey, do you think the banquet is great? Because our feedback on the banquet is always in the 90% positive on just about every category. So we wanted to ask that specific question about location, because we are conscious of, is the drive terrible for people? Is the parking terrible for people? And of the 130 who had responded up to this point, I think it was 9 who said the location wasn't good for them. And it was about the same ratio that said that the night of the week that we picked, that they would rather do another night, but in the 90s also said, no, the night works, Fridays works for us as well.
Yeah, so the last thing I would say is that here's an opportunity to do something in Denton County and not for DFW or Dallas County. And I think those should be heavily weighted factors, right? We can keep this local. There's a benefit to that. And we talk about the way that we may or may not want to procure from people based on certain attributes they have. I think this is, again, is an opportunity to have this here. The Embassy Suites is very nice to cover this type of event. Or I'm not saying as it relates to the people, I'm just saying the venue is good. And I would prefer that we lean in that direction for the reasons I stated.
Ready, Mr. Miller, Ms. Lazan?
So this was my first employee banquet, and I just wanted to say publicly, good job. I thought your staff did a great job. You know, I thought that the people that attended had a good time. So, you know, and I've attended, you know, big banquets at both places. And while, yes, the MC Suites is easier to get in and out of, you know, to me, I don't have a huge amount of skin in the game one way or the other. As someone who's planned events like this before, you know, I fully understand that there's a lot of, I'm sure there's some staff people that y'all work with every single time when you're at the Hyatt, and that makes your jobs a whole lot easier. And it obviously produces a really good product, I think, for lack of a better term. So, you know, in this case, I'm kind of leaning more towards, since to me, there's no big thing that outstands one or the other, I'm kind of leaning more towards what staff, you know, since y'all do this for us. I guess that's kind of where my feeling is on it. And yes, the 2-year deal I think sounds great.
Mr. Miller, are you okay with the 2-year deal?
Yeah, he said he
We
would.
said yes, okay. Any other comments? Okay, so for me, just to kind of, it's kind of a combination of what all the boards said. I like having it in Denton County. I think that's a nice perk. However, what Ms. Sells was addressing, that's what's going to be the 2 issues for me is what does the parking look like at Embassy, because there isn't really a parking garage facility. There is a lot of parking out there, but let's say they have another event, they have a lot of other rooms out there.
And
So-
I will just to say, we know for sure that there is another event planned for the night that we are planning to be there. And we would, at the Embassy Suites, we would have to share a common area. You know how we have that downstairs at the Hyatt? We would have to share that common area with that other group.
Yeah, I
So
don't like
that's
that.
just another piece.
So that's a negative for me. So the other thing was, the distance, which, thank you, Ms. Sells, you did Waze that. You figured that out for me. Thank you, Ms. Sells. The other thing is you kind of answered it, but is to consider a different night. You know, maybe Sunday at midnight, we might get a really great deal or something. I don't know. I mean, no one would be there, no traffic, but just in seriousness, maybe a different night, a weeknight or something. Could we get a better rate? And what would that look like? Because it's Friday night is a prime night.
So you're saying another night for the back end for a cost perspective,
Right.
not
Yeah.
staff one way or the other, but
No,
just for
right.
the finding out if that could be an option.
Right.
Okay.
Just consideration.
I think we could consider it. I think for most teachers, first off, there's a lot of activities that are happening Monday through, even Friday night, of course. And I think most teachers aren't gonna want to go to a event that goes till 10 in the middle of the week, because some of them have to be at work at 6:30 in the morning. So that's the only negative of that.
So that was, and just to kind of go back to the survey, we had, out of the 3 people skipped it, so 125 people answered. 104 said the date of the banquet was convenient. Of that, they said hold it on a different weeknight, not a Friday. 10 people said that. And then 11 people said hold it on a weekend. So again, it was, 83% of the people who responded said that the event, that the date was convenient for them.
And I think, speaking as a former high school principal, I think holding it on the weekend, Saturday, is probably out because you have too many large high schools looking for venues for prom, beginning in mid-April till mid-May.
Do a combo.
Yeah, oh my goodness. No
Wow.
combos.
Wow.
Thank you, Ms. Friend.
Are you okay
Thank y'all
with
so
the
much.
2-year deal?
Thank y'all so much.
Do we feel like we have enough information to, anyway, we'll make a recommendation and we'll go from there next Monday night. Okay?
Right.
Thank
All
y'all.
right, thank you. We're ready for the finance report, Mr. Ball. Looks like you're up for quite a while, Mr. Ball.
Thank you. I'm sorry about that, Ms. Cox.
Thank you.
For y'all, I'm sorry.
You need some water, Mr. Ball?
I've got some, thank you. This item is to discuss the call and defeasance of some bonds in accordance with our budget, and also a potential new money bond sale. And we do have Mr. Martin. We actually have 2 Mr. Martins here somewhere. I know they're here. John Martin and Michael Martin, who's also an LHS or LISD alumni. And so he is now licensed in the business, so he's here to provide the other Mr. Martin with some support. So welcome,
You won't
Michael.
let him
We're
sit
glad
by you,
you're
no?
here.
He's told him stories, right?
Go ahead.
He's not quite ready.
But we want to start out by kind of going over the discussion item that's in board book and just point to some specific things in relation to what we told the voters back in 2017. And the document you have in board book schedules out what we had anticipated the bond sales being each year, and we're well over $125 million below what we had projected we would sell each year. And this year, in 2019, we were projecting the bond sale to be $147,460,000, and the recommendation we made last week or last month is $125 million. And so, and then last year it was significantly below what we had projected. And then also listed in this discussion item is a comparison of the tax rates that we had told the voters would be the maximum tax rates in those respective years. And in 2018, the rate that we adopted was 1.95 cents less than what we had told the voters. In 2019, the rate that's being proposed is 5.35 cents below what we told the voters would be the maximum. and then the 2020 rate is, of course, to be determined. But we are significantly doing better than what we told the voters in 2017 when we had the election. And then also in board book is the actual scenario, we call them, that had in red off to the right those rates that were listed as the maximum rates. And then the other thing that's in board book that we wanted to call the board's attention to is the fact that last month when we made the recommendation of $125 million, the question arose about, well, how do you know how much you need? And what we've done is we've provided a cash flow projection that we've used to show the construction projects that have been approved by the board and what our best estimate of the percentage completion on those projects would be as the end of next August. Because as we think about a bond sale for the summer of 2019, we need to include enough cash in that to get us through August 31 of next year. Because if our plan all along was to have one bond sale each year, which hopefully minimizes the cost of issuance over the 5-year bond program. And so we're trying to get enough cash each year to get us to the August 31st or the end of the subsequent fiscal year. And so you see in the first of those cash flow projections, it lists the recommended sale amount of $125 million. And down at the bottom right-hand corner of that in green, it shows that there would be about $16 million left over at the end of next August. And you might reasonably say, gee, that's a lot of money. $16 million by anyone's standard is a lot of money. But keep in mind that amount is predicated on the accuracy of virtually all of those estimates of the percentage completion. So if one of those projects happens to go a little quicker than projected, we could find ourselves in a spot where we don't have the cash to pay the pay applications that come in. So we need a little bit of cushion there. And so that's why we've recommended the $125 million sale this year. Then the next cash flow projection that's there is identical to the first one. The only thing that's different is down at the bottom, it projects a bond sale of $110 million. And it shows you that there would be just about $1.1 million left over at the end of August. And so it just shows you that if we do that we could put ourselves in a situation where we might have to have another bond sale and incur some additional costs of issuance. So these two cash flow forecasts really are in response to the question that arose at the April meeting about, gee, how'd you come up with the amount that you're recommending to sell? And so with that background, Mr. Martin will have some projections of what those two scenarios would look like and the impact they would have on the tax rate. And he also will have some projections that relate to some questions that came in from trustees about, okay, what if we spend a little less on technology? I think there was a question about that arose in a technology item in another agenda item. And then what happens if the growth in property values are less than what's assumed in the scenario that the board saw last month? So those scenarios John has that he'll pass out to you. But before we get to that, we thought we'd talk about the first item that's in this item, which is a call of the bonds that are subject to call and just paying those off or defeasing those. And if the board will recall, we did budget $5 million in the current year's debt service fund budget. So we have those funds budgeted, and I think we already pretty much have the cash available to do that because we are collecting our taxes at a rate that will give us the money to do that. And also the question arose last month about could we find a combination to get another $500,000 there, and I think the answer to that is yes. And so that's a good segue to turn this over to Mr. Martin to go through what's callable and what we think the best combination of those callable bonds is in order to use that $5.5 million to retire some debt.
Thank you, Mr. Ball. Thank you for having me here this evening. We've got a color-coded chart for you all this evening to show your debt profile, really of all the bonds that are outstanding. Some are and how much has been paid off, the balances, and what the call date is for all the bonds that are outstanding. Some of the ones that are a little newer, and you've got still some that looked at the low balances, you can tell those have been bonds that the board has refunded in the past. So we're looking at taking advantage here, as we talked about the last meeting, of taking a little over $5 million, about $5.5 million, and refunding that 2011 that's in kind of the, not pink, but the kind of the, what is that awful color? There were that $10,645,000 is outstanding there. Those bonds are callable August 15, 2019. And there were still bonds that were out at like 2.5% to 3% there that we'd leave out. The longer maturities that are 5% and 4%, we would call. Then you can say, looking down the road, what do we have? What's the following year? As you all look to set your tax rate this following year, if you were to try to establish the same thing of trying to build in some debt reduction money as well. So if you look down at the far right-hand little box, I just try to make it simple in terms of showing the bonds that are callable each year. We'll turn around in February 2020. That $25 million, that's the BADS deal, okay? So it's important to realize that if we refund out of that, the subsidy goes away. So that's $500,000 that's also on the table that you all are talking about doing some other things with. So keep that in the back of your mind as you look at that. The next one, then in August 2020, there's roughly $42 million there of two issues that are the 2012 A and Bs. So some or all could be either refunded part cash, part bonds, whatever there may be. I will tell you that given the way that, as an aside, that where the yield curve is right now, and the market's being so flat, that there are a lot of synthetic products that we're seeing, swap products. You all have heard of the derivative type products that are available to enter into, to refund now, take the savings now, lock in the savings now for something that is refundable in 20 and 21. So that's an option out there. We can further pursue that. We're looking into it. We've had a couple of calls. Michael and I talked to some of our structured products people today to learn a little bit more about that. They cuffed us a number just to give you an idea for that $30,650,000, the 2012A, and told us that there was about 7% savings there that you could immediately take. Now, you take your chances that where rate's going to be and what are they thinking. Remember, all these big swap providers and so forth, they're hedged whichever way. So they're going to make money no matter which way the market goes. So unfortunately, that's not where we are. So we have to roll the dice a little bit and guess. So that's out there. That's something to think about. You take your savings, lock in your savings now, and at the call date, then you'd start having the same type deal. So that's something that's out there. There's also some other. There's a German bank that our structured products deal with that they do, where they want to buy the call date from you. So to purchase that, they would pay you dollars for the right to call those bonds, or then they own the right to call the bonds rather than you. And so it's kind of interesting. There's a lot of games that are being played out there, a lot of different products. We see this when the yield curve gets a little strange like it is now. So these things start surfacing. So just throw that out there. There are some options out there. We don't know of any other schools in Texas that have done these right now. So the legalities would obviously have to be worked out, and the Attorney General would have to sign off us. And you all are considered a sophisticated issuer and would have the ability to enter into those types of agreements under state law. So, but it's the fine print in these products that you got to be careful for. So that's that part of the presentation in terms of what's out there in the future. You can see you start getting out to 2022 and 2023, there's some big dollars, approaching $100 million each year that are eligible for redemption. And you can see where those bonds fall out there in the 13 and 14 bonds as those start to be eligible for redemption. That's on current call dates.
And really, I don't think this scenario has changed since last month. The question was what bonds are available for call in the future, and hopefully that's provided here. And we do anticipate when we come back in June, we have one more look at this at the June work session, and then we'd be asking for the board's authority to move forward at the June regular monthly meeting. And then what we'll do is go over the scenarios tonight with the ones we just mentioned, with $125 million, with the slower taxable value growth, and the $125 million with the reduced technology spending, and then the same two scenarios for the $110 million. And then we want to give you some more time to process all of that, and then come back during the month of June and hopefully seek the board's approval to move forward with a sale this summer, and for July pricing with actual funding in August. So that's kind of our timeline. That was a little bit of a stall while John's passing out the handouts, but just to kind of tell you what we're about to do and what we hope to do in June. So John, if you want to kind of go through these scenarios.
So when we left the workshop last month, we had talked about some different ideas of which and some thoughts, things that you all wanted to see, which Mr. Ball addressed in the board book discussion item. I don't know what y'all call this. But also there were some questions that came in the meantime for what would happen, as Mr. Ball said, with if the values were not to grow as fast. If rather than 8% next year we got 6% growth, and then also if some of the technology were cut back by about $4.1 million. So we've run those scenarios both on updated kind of what we're calling the base model. The $125 million is just an update from last month's. So the bond market has been favorable. The couponing, as you see those interest rates here, these 5% to 4% rates. This is what we call a general market scale. What we're seeing, and this is exactly what Northwest ISD sold for last week. So we know that it's on the mark. However, we do believe that where rates are now, that we are seeing in negotiated sales where we would have an opportunity to get more 4% coupons in there. So that would help us quite a bit. And so there's more the institutional buyers that have demanded these 5% rates have backed off because we believe that that interest rates are going to stay back down and not continue. So they want to see the 5% coupons in a higher rate environment. Remember a few years ago we were seeing 3s and 4s more often than not. This last issue we were able to push some of the bonds. We had them, the 5% coupons, we made sure we got a short call date on those so we could get to them quicker. And then the 4%ers we gave a standard 9-year call. So we do believe that we could get today move some of these 5s to 4s in the right negotiated sale by working through the underwriting team and so forth. That's the wonderful thing about a negotiated sale. So all that said, this does give you a general market idea. Again, this is the Northwest ISD, the rates and yields that they received. An update just on the base model. The TIC here, true interest cost, is 2.92%. So you're seeing less than 3% borrowing. Again, as you saw on the sheet that was the projections. When we went to the voters, we were using 4.5% through those projections, and not as high a projection either on the values. So the first sheet's the base model. Then behind that, We see what happens if we have slower growth and to go instead of 8%, 6%. Well, you can see that that's about 0.0075. Almost a full penny difference, 38.26 versus 38.99 in the first year. Does that make sense to everybody? Slower AV growth. And then the 125 million, if you back off and do more building projects and less technology projects with that 125 million. So you'd be doing $16.8 million of technology amortizing in the first 5 years, right? Rather than through the full 20 years. So that brings it down to, and again, using the regular base model of 8% growth next year of 0.3822. So slightly better, again, out in the fourth decimal. So it looks, slicing and dicing it different ways, you're still right around the 38 cents, right? So then those are the first three. The last three schedules are showing you the 110 million. Same assumptions as 125. We just backed it down using these same interest rates. So if we, rather than 125, we use 110, also 2.92%. And you can see the difference in the two. You keep flipping back and forth. 38.26 cents versus 38.11 cents. Again, out in the third decimal. Same deal, slower growth, 110 on the slower growth is the fifth model. It's 6%. And then if we back off the technology by 4.1 million, 4.14 million, it's just under 38 cents at that one. It's a lot of numbers. There's a lot of scenarios we can run. We're happy to do as many as you want.
Ms. Cox,
It starts to get overwhelming, and I'm sorry that there's so much, but we're just
I think
trying to
the
answer
takeaway.
We want to make sure we answer all your questions.
Yeah, I think the takeaway for me is that at the recommended amount of $125 million, it's about a penny and a half cent increase in the rate, which is about a nickel below what we told the taxpayers. And if you reduce the technology spending a little bit, then we're really not being consistent with what we told the voters in that regard, and it really doesn't save that much on the tax rate. If we drop the sale amount down to 110 million, it does place us right on the edge of not having the cash to make the payments as they come due, and it doesn't have that. It's about a 1.36 cent increase to do that, and so our thinking is that we would like to seek the board's approval to move forward with a $125 million sale and do exactly what we promised to the voters in every regard, with regard to the tax rate, the technology spending, all the things that we said we would do when we had the bond campaign. So I think that, for me, that kind of sums it up. And we do want to listen to the board and address the questions that are raised, and hopefully we've done that tonight and given you maybe more numbers than you wanted, but hopefully they've been responsive to the questions that were raised.
Thank you, Mr. Ball. Ms. Hassett?
Okay. Just one weird question. Why is the margin of error lower for the 110 million versus the 125?
It's just a difference of $15 million.
But the margin of error for calculation is significantly lower. So why is it easier to?
I think the projection about the cash needs are exactly the same in both scenarios. And the only difference is the 16 million and change and the 1 million and change. If you do the math on those, are exactly $15 million difference in those two numbers.
She's talking about, sorry.
I don't have it in front of me.
Okay, so right here it says that there's a differential of 0.34.
Oh, that's just the percentage of.
But why is it?
That's
why is it
just
so
the
much lower?
percentage of. It's the percentage of the needed cash that's left over is all that is. So it's 16 million divided into 323 million versus 1.1 million divided into that.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Maybe that was not maybe a good label
It's
to
the
put on
percentage of wiggle room
Right, there you go.
contingency.
Wiggle room, yeah,
Yeah.
rather than margin, okay,
Yeah.
no, that one, yes.
Wiggle room sounds better than margin of error.
When I
That's
was
not a
trying to-
very, that's not a very
It's a
good
technical
CPA term, I don't think.
No, but okay. Okay, the BABs, are the BABs the only, the 2010B, are they the only ones that were on the BABs? Or is there another one on there? I'm trying to-
Those are the only Build America bonds that you have. You have some QSCABs, another cute term.
Right.
QSCB, Quality School Construction Bonds, Qualified School Construction Bonds. And those are low coupon, those are non-callables, but those are the only two federal program type deals that you have. That was a tax credit deal that you're paying 0.75%. Can't get out of it. So, but you don't have the subsidy deal there, so there's no reason to pay them off.
And what was the amount you said you found a little bit extra for us to incorporate into,
It was the $500,000. What we have budget is an even $5 million.
so 5.5?
And last month when we talked about this, the question was, could we
more.
find? And I think the answer is yes.
It would just clean out a full maturity
Right.
of that. There was an odd maturity that would be hanging out that and it would just provide more savings. You'd be able to get more of those 4% bonds called in. And there was just 550, rather, we couldn't get to a nice round $5 million, so $5,555,000.
Works for me though,
Works
because we're
perfect, yeah.
calling more. So, in the regular old $125 million base model, with 8% growth, I thought the first one last month actually showed a slight increase in INS.
It is.
And this one isn't.
Yeah, it is.
It's a penny, 1.51 cent increase in the INS rate.
Right. So then really it doesn't allow us to do what we've done last year by keeping it steady to
None of
allow.
these scenarios will allow that. At the growth rates that are assumed here, the reason we were able to do it in the current year is because our growth rate was closer to 10%.
Higher. Right.
But we've got to be conservative when we make these
No, I get that.
projections. So if we get to August, when it's time to set our tax rate, and we see that the values have been more than what we projected, then the board will have that flexibility. But
Which is what this represents too, because it's higher than the 6% then, right?
well,
So this
I think
differs.
the original assumption of an 8% growth rate, that was what we thought was a reasonable assumption to make, and not be irresponsible and assume a growth rate that's not even realistic. We're hopeful that it will be more than that, but we were asked to provide some scenarios with a lower growth assumption,
didn't happen.
and that's what you see highlighted in yellow. Those two are highlighted in
I
yellow.
think that's, if I could interject there, why we had a pretty good drop off from 19 to 20, because we have a pretty good, we feel comfortable, we're hopeful, pretty confident that it'll be double digit again this year. But next year could be kind of dicey, as we all know there's a lot of pressure on assessments right now, and it could be half in terms of go from 10% to 5%. So that's why we use the 5% the following year.
Okay.
And you can see that there's a when you drop off there, to your point, there's a 2-cent difference, 2-cent drop off. So we'd hope to be able to fill that gap in and still stay within what the projection was to the voters. I think we're ultimately at 43.49 for next year, still well below.
Okay. I have no other questions right now.
Ms. Timish?
All right, thank you. So I appreciate when you talked about doing the less technology, that would not be in line with what we told our voters if we did that scenario,
That's correct.
Okay, so thank you, because that to me is very important that we are doing what we say when we go out for these. So, and then also, I appreciate you giving us all the different scenarios, but I can tell you, I appreciate your wisdom and the depth of understanding, because there's a lot of moving parts, but selling a call date to like a German company just is not something I'm interested in.
Understand?
But thank you.
Understand? Want to make you aware of all.
I know, and that's what I'm saying. I really appreciate
Yeah.
that, and I love all the opportunities, but I just am,
Yeah.
like, some of that just seems like I really would want to make sure we knew.
Yep. Absolutely.
The
I
consequence
don't
of
blame
it
you,
at
but I
every
would be
level.
remiss if I didn't tell you about it.
No, and that's why I want to say thank you, but I, at the same time, want to make sure that we're always being very good stewards
Yep.
of the money that's been entrusted to us.
Ms. Helms, thank you for just the wealth of information, and especially this one. I like this format. I would like to make sure that we're apprised in those options, and if we see other school districts start to take advantage of those other options, that synthetic and that swap. I'd love to know when that occurs, if you have that information
Sure.
at any time. And I guess when that occurs, maybe more drill down in the positives and the negatives of those
Yep.
for us. And I stand with Ms. Tamish. I'm not interested in selling our call dates. I think that could be a very slippery slope that we get into. So,
Yep.
but I do appreciate all the different scenarios, and this will be great bedtime reading this evening. So, yeah. Mr. Miller.
Thank you for all this. So, I just want to be clear about words like that we're doing what we told the voters we would do. Because here's what we told the voters we would do. We would set tax rates based on a certain amount of principal we would sell and potential interest rates that had property valuation growth against it, and we gave them all sorts of scenarios, and we gave them good scenarios, and we gave them the worst case scenarios. That's what we told the voters. We didn't tell the voters that we were going to have a tax rate in 2020 that was based on 43.49. I want to be really clear about that. That's not what we said. We said that based on certain things not being in our favor, it could be that. Would you guys disagree with that?
I would disagree with that,
disagree
Mr.
with
Miller.
that.
We actually, the scenario that's in your board book was actually presented publicly, and the reason those tax rates are highlighted in red is because we said to the voters, we are projecting that these will be the maximum tax rates. If you go in and dial in yes on this proposal, we're suggesting that, or we're projecting that these that are highlighted in red on the right column of that scenario would be the maximum rates. And we felt like people needed that information so that they could make an informed vote, yes or no. And
Well, I think truth in taxation suggests that we should give them that, but I think what we're talking about here is that the maximum it would be. That's what we told them. We didn't tell them it would be, because here's for an example. If we would have gone with what we said it would be, then we would not have reduced the tax rate last year. We would have just gone with, or
We didn't
would have-
reduce the tax rate last year,
Or we kept it at 3,675.
so that we could have this money to do this.
So then what we're making, then this is about, if this is about purely what we told the voters, then what we need to do is every year just let them know that it's based on this property valuation. It's going to be, for example, this year 43 cents. I think they expect, however, us to make responsible decisions based on certain market conditions. And by the way, we did share with the FAC and others variations of these tables, that if it was 6% growth rate, if it was 4% growth rate, we gave them those options. They all had those when they went there. So what we put in front of the voters was, hey, if these assumptions, these things happen here, property valuation growing at this, the amount of principal, then it would be this amount. Okay? That's what we told them. And I think we're getting into here, one of the questions that I asked last month was, what is the principal amount we need to sell to keep it 36.75? That number's not in here. What we're hearing is, well, if we took the $4.1 million off of IT, which I guess that was a big discussion point, but it really wasn't a material discussion point for me. The material discussion point for me was, given the climate that we're in, for us to vote in August for a tax increase, or to us to hold taxes flat, what would that principle be? And then we had a discussion about what are the projects that we need. Because in order for us to assume that that's 16 million, and I don't disagree with you on that, Mike, but there's another issue here that's not being invoked, which is we have a fund balance that exists today that's not going to be used for principal, and that exists after we pay off this 5.5 million. So there's still some cushion in there. So we could make some changes with the IT flow. We could reduce the principal a little bit and keep the tax rate the same in the current political environment, because here's what was not being discussed when we put this bond forward: a 2.5% price cap, property tax value, property taxes being such a hot topic with the legislature in 2019. Those were the things we didn't anticipate. And so what I'm trying to understand is why we can't get to, well, what's a scenario, because we've got a couple months, the amount of money that would keep us at 3.675. That's a
36.4 million. That's how much you can issue. You can keep the tax rate the same, assuming an 8% growth in valuation this year.
Against the 42 cents? You're saying that
if you want to keep the tax rate from today's tax rate is 36.75. If you want to keep the tax rate at 36.75 next year, that's what I understand.
We
the
can only
question.
sell 36 million.
That's it. You got 2,450,000 in payments you can deal with. Over 20 years at 3%, that gives you 36.4 million.
So a 6-cent increase in the tax rate allows us to sell $90 more million.
Where's the 6?
6 cents?
It's not 6 cents.
I'm sorry, the 0.06, going from 36.75 to 40.
Mr. Miller, I think the issue is that our commitment to the public was that we would retire the technology portion of the debt over the useful life of the technology.
Correct.
And so what that does is it front-end loads the payments. So part of the decision would have to be, if the goal of the board is to leave the tax rate at 36 3/4 cents, then the decision would have to be made: which projects are we not going to do until some future year, and how much of the bond sale would be attributable to technology, because that part we have, unless the board wants to change that given, we committed that we would retire that debt over 5 years. And so that's why it makes such a significant difference in the principal amount.
So I want to make sure I understand this. What we're saying is that if we were just to keep the tax rate the way it is, we could really only issue about $36 million.
That's a fact. Over 20 years.
I mean,
that's over
that's
20 years.
$90
You can't do that.
difference.
You can't do your technology either out of that 36 million, because you can't amortize it that quick in 5 years.
So that 36 cents versus what tax rate?
Say that again.
The tax rate for the 125 million is what?
0.3826. A penny and a half.
0.3826. So 0.3826 versus 0.3675. You're saying that's a difference? If we kept that tax rate that smaller difference, we could only issue a third of that money?
It's a fourth.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just doing the math to get to 0.3675, which is roughly to give you a payment of 142 million combined payment. Right now, we're sitting on 148 with 125 million.
I mean, that...
Again,
that
the
couple
biggest portion of
pennies-
it that's not being seen here is the compression of the technology piece.
Right, I get that.
That's the difference.
I get that, but
Once we get out of the once we get past this year and we get out of the technology,
But that 4.1
rapid
million
amortization.
in technology, there's enough fund balance there if we wanted to.
No.
And
We could,
Depends.
go ahead.
it's not like
So, Mr. Miller, some great questions. you know, luckily, we don't have to decide all this, and we can provide the other scenario. And, I mean, he'll create a sheet like this on the .3675.
Sure.
And you're gonna have another board work session and a regular board meeting before we have to finalize that. So I don't want us to get stuck on this, but I know you have some other questions. So.
Well, I mean, I can leave it at that, because that's the question that I asked last time, and
Sure.
I think, you know, I'm struggling with the numbers, and I'm glad to see what they look like. I would like, and I think I was consistent last week. What does a scenario look like that we do not, assuming that the property tax increase comes in as what you have in this scenario? What amount of money can we sell at and keep the tax rate flat? That's what I'd like to know.
Okay.
And
We'll provide that to you.
I think that the voters expect us to run those scenarios, not to default to the worst case scenario that we put before them. And it's not disingenuous for us to find a more efficient way to do these things. Because here's the thing, we all know this, and I'm going to say it publicly. We gave these estimates to the voters on the project estimates and on the tax rates to be as conservative as possible, so there'd be no surprises. And so it still begs the question where we're getting any efficiencies. Now, I think there's a story here that you guys started to tell as it relates to Mike talking about we haven't issued all the money that we said we would. But remember, that's one view. The other view is that we're holding the right to be able to sell them later on. So those are things that we have to balance just to make sure.
Absolutely. Because we made those promises to the community that we would do those projects. So
And
the
we're
timing
doing
of it
it.
is, yeah. But I will tell you as a taxpayer myself that I'm going to be more upset that we don't build on a time frame what we promised the voters than to pay for a house that costs $350,000 to go from .3675 to .38, $49 more a year in taxes. I'm more upset because the projects don't get built.
Right, and I respectfully, I've never said that that's what we should do.
Yeah, I know.
What I've asked for was an explanation of
Yeah, we'll get that.
efficiency. There are projects that have been completed. Not a single person that's elected at this table could tell us on completion where we're at on any of those projects, plus or minus. I'll bet you there's some projects that we didn't spend all the money. And so those are the types of things around efficiency that I think are fair questions that take a look at where we could cut some corners. I am not suggesting, and I want to be clear, that we don't do the projects we said we would in the time frame. I'm not suggesting that. But there are some places, and I think technology could be a place where just because we have the money doesn't mean we need to spend it, unless, assuming that there's not a huge deviation from the way that we're rolling that out. And so there's always opportunities to be efficient. We should be able to show that to the board, let the board understand it, and then make decisions based on that, especially when we're looking at a tax increase in the current climate.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Ms. Lazan.
Thank you for the information. It was, like Ms. Sells, may have to take some time to digest it and ask questions. But I will say, I guess, as far as what Mr. Miller, follow up on what you were saying, I was in there every meeting for those facility advisory committee, meetings, and I fully, think that the taxpayers did understand that there would be a tax increase, and as a person that sat in those meetings, if it's less than what we projected, to me, that's great news. I mean, that's my personal opinion. The other question I had is this, again, I do not agree with this at all, taking, $4 million out of technology, but where did that figure come from? Like, was there a certain thing that you were looking at cutting, or?
I think that was a question that arose in relation to an agenda item at the April regular meeting, if I
Okay.
recall, where one of the trustees said, "Hey," someone asked the question, "What if we what if we went to class sets and I've forgotten the exact
what you're
specifics,
talking- I
but
know
the
what you're
number
referring
was
to.
$4,140,000 and some
Okay.
change.
Okay,
And that's the number that we used to run that scenario.
okay. And again, I will say I don't support that at all, but,
Well, I would advocate that. The board voted, so I'm not even sure why it's, I mean, it was 5-2. The decision's been made. I'm not sure why we're even talking about it, right? I agree.
Well, we ran the numbers because we were asked to.
We were asked to do it.
all right, that's all I got.
Ms. Hassan, Ms. Posse?
So thank you. I know that I am a reason for a lot of this work because I wanted to see it in black and white, because I wanted to see exactly what it looked like. So I greatly appreciate the work, and I greatly appreciate you running the numbers.
That's what we're here for.
So as you know, of course, I have more questions. So, and Mr. Ball, you might be the one who answers this one. How much encumbered funds are there in our INS fund?
I don't have that number on the tip of my tongue, but it is included in the board book documents for the next Monday's meeting. There is a report on the 2017 bond package there that shows what's committed, and then the cash flow projections that you have in tonight's board book document show all of the package, the projects that the board has already approved, and our estimate. Well, there's a column that shows what was spent as of April the 5th, I believe, and there's another column that shows what our estimate of the percentage would be of completion for 8/31/2020, and then that's just a math problem from there to calculate what the anticipated cash needs would be.
So, so my next question, and I'm happy to look that up, but can you tell me what level is recommended for us to maintain in our INS fund?
The recommendation is for the $125 million sale. I mean, we could,
No,
is that-
I think she's talking about the fund,
The debt service fund.
Oh, the
debt
fund,
service
debt
fund.
service.
The
Well,
debt service fund is what I'm trying to figure out how much money we have in there now, and I'm happy to look that up for next meeting. But what is that recommendation for us to maintain in that fund?
okay, the recommendation is 25% of the subsequent year's debt service. And what's there is, if you look on our audit report, it's gonna show that there's about $42 million in fund balance.
Okay.
What the audit report doesn't disclose, though, is about 10 million of that is earmarked in a trust fund for actually the Q-scabs that Mr. Martin mentioned earlier, the qualified school construction bonds that were part of the stimulus package along with the BABs. And so you have to back that 10 million out. So we really, at 8/31 last year, we had about $32 million in fund balance, and then the projection is that we budgeted for an additional $5 million in principal this year, and we're talking about using an additional $500,000 out of that. And so I think we should end the fiscal year with about $30 to $32 million in unencumbered fund balance. Now, the fund balance is going to continue to grow because we're making payments on those Q-scabs, and those payments go into a trust fund that then is used to retire those at maturity.
So is that 32 million 25%?
Well, it's actually a little less than 25%. If you multiply that by 4, you're going to get about $128 or so million. In our annual, the debt service next year, if we didn't sell any bonds, is about $138 million, I believe.
And I do have a question for you, Mr. Martin. I think you're getting out of here. So when you were talking about the other scenarios of what we could do with some of the higher interest rates, monies and so forth, could we plan to combine that with new bond sale money down the road as a plan? Are you following me? I'm looking beyond this year. I'm looking beyond this year.
Okay.
Because I'm looking at what we could, with your swaps and your your alphabet soup of acronyms, could that be combined with a new money sale? You know me, I hate paying $3,000 for someone to tell me that I can sell bonds.
I'll have to check on that. So you're talking about doing a synthetic new money deal?
Yeah.
Okay. Rather than a
I mean,
publicly
I'm curious if that's even a viable, scenario.
Yeah, I don't see why it wouldn't be.
Okay.
Just, we don't see much of that, other than really huge issuers like DFW Airport and that sort of thing, Tollway Authority. But I'll certainly ask the question.
And then because I am greedy, I love this. Could I get one that shows what is refundable? Or is this it? Is that all the refundable then as well?
That's everything, yeah.
That's everything. Okay.
Yeah, so the call date tells you when those bonds can be refunded.
Oh, got it.
Okay?
Yeah, they're only refundable to the extent that the interest rate at the time of the call date is less than what's being paid on.
Exactly.
That's it.
I know Ms. Hassett will appreciate this because we talked about the different legislation and so forth at the federal level. There is quite a bit of discussion that we hear that the potential of advance refundings may come back. So that's
Really?
Wow.
That's a big
From
plus.
the feds? The feds are discussing that?
Yeah, and it could be part of the. We're trying to get it
budget?
into the Bond Dealers Association. We're trying to push that into the infrastructure bill.
Nice. It could be infrastructure.
Sure.
Why not? It has to do with infrastructure.
I don't have any questions at this time, but thank you very much for taking time to help answer board questions and doing due diligence on that, Mr. Martin.
And Mr. Martin, can we get that 0.3675?
No tax increase,
like in the next
absolutely.
day or so?
You will have it before you go to bed tonight.
Well, okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Martin.
Thank you.
Mr. Ball?
Okay, thank you, Ms. Cox. This item has to do with the question that's been raised about should we transfer the federal interest subsidy on the Build America bonds from the debt service fund to the general fund. And so what you have in front of you is, it's not in front of you, I guess, unless you're logged into board book, but you have the little write-up about that talks about the Build America bonds were part of the stimulus program in 2009. And then you have the actual IRS form that we sign and request the subsidy. And what's listed on that IRS form is 100% of what should be paid by the IRS to us, and that's 35% of the, in this case, semi-annual interest payment that's due. And so this is one of the forms. We'll sign the other one in August, and so you double this number, and that's what our interest subsidy should be. And then if you flip the page to the next page, we actually got the cash we got is reduced by 6.2%, which is the amount of the sequestration. So now we're talking a percentage of the percentage, and so maybe I should simplify it to just say we were supposed to get $263,000. We only got $246,000 in change, and so then the last couple of pages show you the sequestration rates since this thing was done. And for 2019, that rate is 6.2%. And then the last page shows you the subsidy that's scheduled to be received, which is $504,000 per year. That's
your payment.
I'm sorry, that's the payment. The interest subsidy is $246,000 twice a year. And so the question is, the way this was set up, that all that money goes into the debt service fund to reduce the interest, because the interest on these bonds is taxable to the bondholder. And so the idea for this stimulus program was that the feds would pay us the 35% difference, which was an effort to estimate what the tax impact to the bondholder would be. And so, but because of the budget crisis at the federal level, they've reduced it for 2019 by 6.2%. So we did get our bond counsel to look at this, and the only requirement is we have to put the money into the debt service fund first, and then we can transfer it to the general fund. So we can do this. I think the issue that the board has to be comfortable with is it does, based on the discussion on the last agenda item, it does appear that the tax rate is a significant concern to the board. And so we would need to understand that moving this money out of the debt service fund into the general fund would place upward pressure on the INS tax rate. So all of the projections that you've seen tonight assume that this interest subsidy would stay in the debt service fund. So it would increase our annual debt service by just under $500,000 if we were to move this into the general fund.
And Mr. Ball, first off, on this, when we discussed this earlier, I mean, I thought it was a great idea of trying to get some more money on the M&O side, which would happen.
Yes.
Really, the question for the board is moving that $500,000 does out of INS, does come in play potentially comes in play maybe for the tax rate.
Yes,
As far
it
as
definitely
putting a little
comes
more
into play.
pressure
Yes.
on the, I mean, we're not saying that the 500,000 is gonna change the tax rate, but it takes away, in my terms, a little more of that wiggle room.
Right, that's correct.
So, we just need to hear, from the board, sort of y'all's comfort level, and maybe John or Mike can.
And just so the board knows, as you're looking at what's in board book, we set it up where we put in board book the action that would be necessary if the board wants to do this. If you don't want to do it, there's no action necessary, so we would just pull that item. So when you look in board book, don't think we already made up our mind what y'all might want to do. We just set it up where you'd have that option. And if you don't want to do it, we just pull the item. So it's either way the board wants to go, we're set up to do it.
Thank you, Mr. Ball. Ms. Sells?
I guess for me, I'm on the fence with it. And I guess I would like some more negatives of both of those and even the positives of both of those. Do we have a purpose for it to go into the general fund budget at this time? I mean, would we?
Well,
I mean, is it just gonna, we're just gonna move it over there and then? It's just the principal?
I think, yeah, I think.
Is that all we're looking at?
I think, Ms. Sells, that's a great question. I think, when we're looking at a deficit budget on the M&O side, it was a way to help cut a little bit into that deficit. So, that's when we discussed it earlier. That was really for the concept.
And I guess for me, just taking that money out and putting it in, I'd like some definites of the impact. I mean, it says impact on the general fund budget. Well, it's just gonna make added more. And so I would like to, if we don't do it, what are the consequences, I guess?
Yeah, I don't know if Mike, in his CPA hat, would use padding it more when we have a deficit. When we have a deficit, but I get what you're saying.
I mean,
I think the context when this it's a great idea, and the context that when this idea came up was we were looking at, and we still are looking at, a $27 million deficit based on current law. Well, since that time, we've done a lot of work to reduce our expenditures. The legislature's done a lot of work to hopefully change the landscape. So to that extent, the context is a little different today than it was 4 or 5 months ago when this discussion first began. And I think the next agenda item will be something along these same lines. It's an idea to get some cost out of the general fund over into the debt service fund. And this is a similar idea on the BAB's interest, to get some revenue out of the debt service fund into the general fund, which helps with the general fund deficit. I think the thinking is that the board has the flexibility to set the INS rate at whatever's needed to make the debt service, where the board doesn't have that flexibility in the general fund. And so I think that would be the purpose for it. Not so much, hey, we're going to take this $500,000 and do X with it. It's just, it gives it takes that revenue out of a fund that the board has flexibility on and puts it into a fund where the board doesn't have flexibility. I think that's how I would characterize that. And we'll talk about another matter here in a few minutes that goes the other direction, but the same principle.
So when, is there a limit on when we have to make a decision to transfer the BABs from INS to M&O?
Yes, sir. If we're going to do it, we would need to do it before the end of the fiscal year, because this is an annual deal. We get this money each year.
Right, okay. So we would have to do it before then. You said that putting that money there could have an impact on the INS rate.
Yes, sir.
Can't we see what that is based on your current projections? I mean, the numbers you guys gave us tonight assume that amount of money coming out. What does that do? Because we just talked about it's just under 25%, but almost $30 million fund balance in INS. Is moving $500,000 of BABs that don't exist in there today really going to have an impact on our INS rate? It probably would be to the fourth decimal place, but it would have some upward movement on the tax rate. Yes.
They do exist in the
They do exist in
INS.
the INS fund today.
I'm sorry, there's a lot of people talking. What, Dr. Roger?
Yeah, Mr. Miller, currently they do go into the INS.
I understand that.
Okay.
I guess what I'm trying to ascertain is, once they go into INS, is there a requirement that there's a turnaround period that it has to be done within X number of days to transfer them, or transfer them to M&O?
I would submit that it needs to be done within that fiscal year.
Okay.
Or
So,
I think the board could authorize us to do it every year subsequent to this, but it couldn't be done retroactively, I would submit.
but transferring it by the end of the year is after we would have set the tax rate in August. So we
Well, it
could
would likely
fundamentally-
be at the same meeting if we were
Okay.
going to
Well, we
wait till the
could
end of the year.
discuss it at
But
the
but
session.
I think to Ms. Sells had some fair questions. To mitigate those any concerns there, we could do this at the same meeting when we set the tax rate, that we could decide to transfer the BABs back over to M&O, the kind of highly coveted fund. That's when we could do all that.
We could do that. I think we would need to build that assumption into the tax rate calculations.
Well,
That
right,
we-
that's right, I agree. Is there anything that precludes us of transferring money from M&O? Don't get into, I don't want to hear whether we should or do it. I'm asking legality. Is there anything that prevents us from transferring money from M&O to INS?
I would say there are some legal hoops that would have to be jumped through, or some bases to be touched, and we would certainly want to consult with our bond counsel before we were to do that.
Okay.
Yes, there are some legal parameters around that.
But those would only be relevant if we had to make a decision on transferring the BABs before we set the tax rate, but we needed the BABs back in order for the tax rate to be more acceptable, that's a scenario where we want to consult with somebody. However, here we're talking about not even needing to do anything with the BABs, technically speaking, till at such time we've set the tax rate, right?
Our recommendation would be, if we're gonna do it, to take action this month, because I think those amounts are known, and if it's the board's pleasure to make this transfer, we would build that transfer into the assumptions we make about the tax rate and the recommendation we would bring forward in August. And I think the board would need to, as a practical matter, the board would need to consider, at least for the current fiscal year, it'd be an irrevocable decision. I think once we do that, there's no turning back to bring it back from. You'd spend more in legal fees trying to make sure we did it correctly than the $500,000 would benefit the tax rate, I think.
So then I would say my vote, my inclination would be that at the next meeting we have this as an action item to move the BABs. You're going to talk later about moving some things out of M&O to INS, I think. Anyway, it's the same principle in reverse. It's giving us some money into that coveted account M&O that we need. So my leaning would be to do that at the next meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Mrs. On?
I don't have any questions.
Ms. Crosby?
I think my position on this is pretty firm, that I was the one who wanted to do this back in October, I think it was when we first discussed it. Would this is a decision for this fiscal year, correct?
Yes.
And so we would be bringing this back, if we desired as a board, we would be bringing this back every year. So this is not a forever decision. This is a decision for this fiscal year, correct?
That's correct. That's the way we have it set up. It would be an option, if it's the pleasure of the board, to just make it an ongoing authorization to do that for the remainder of the life of the BABs. But the way we've written the recommendation for next Monday, it would be just for the current year.
Yeah, I like that.
Ms. Hessek?
But doing it this year does affect our INS rate for next year.
Yes, because the assumption in these projections that Mr. Martin has done, the assumption is that that $246,000 payment that we get twice
Right.
is applied, is part of the cash that it takes to make that payment, as opposed to tax revenue.
Right.
So the tax revenue would have to make up that $500,000.
And Mr. Ballo, I mean, I assume John could run that assumption.
Absolutely.
That was gonna be my
removing
second
those-
question.
Absolutely.
Those two payments.
That was definitely gonna be my question. I
Absolutely.
would need that for me. I'm actually not in favor of doing it long-term. I'd have issues with, impacting what was set for that bond, because it does impact the bond. It increases the, impact of that bond. By doing this long-term, it would.
In essence, we would be paying, the debt service fund would be paying taxable interest rates on those bonds for the remainder of the life, because the purpose of that subsidy was to pay what the investor would pay in income taxes
Right.
on that. And so by moving that to the general fund, now we've just effectively increased our interest rates on those bonds.
I'm struggling a lot with this, just because of the fact that these were dedicated funds for the reduction in bonds. Even though we are in an area where M&O funding would be appreciated.
We would not be alone in districts doing that. In fact, our BABs, honestly, for a district our size, are pretty small compared to some of our peers. I mean, there are districts in our area that their BAB subsidy is more on the order of a couple of $1 million a year that they have been from the outset transferring to the general fund. So this is not, we're not blazing a trail
Right.
here at all. This is something that many districts have done, and I think that if the board wants to do that, we've gotten the legal counsel, we know we can do it. And as John mentioned about some of the swaps and other things, it's not it may sound like an editorial when we say it places a little upward pressure on the INS rate, but we'd be remiss if we didn't say that
Right.
and inform the board about making that decision. That's not to say that we don't think it'd be a good thing, because we do have a budget issue in the general fund. There's no question about that.
Right.
And so anything that we can do to relieve that and give the board the flexibility to set rates that would make those payments is probably something that deserves pretty significant consideration.
Following along what other districts are doing really gives me no great comfort. That's not a bonus for me. But I understand that others are doing it, and it is perfectly legal. I just struggle with the conservative nature of using the bond money for anything else but bond.
Well, I think another way to look at it is it's 8 or 9 teacher salaries that you could move into the general fund. To go with the question earlier about what would the use for those funds be. Although I don't know that would be part of the item, you could certainly, when you go to sleep at night, you could know, hey, I did something tonight to create salaries for 8 or 9 teachers.
But the BABs are also on the list of one of the callable items, so how would that affect it?
It wouldn't have any impact on that. All we're talking about, we're going to continue to submit the form to the IRS requesting the reimbursement. They're going to continue to pay us, hopefully. And if the board chooses to refund the BABs at some future date, the whole thing just goes away.
Right, but that future date could be sooner.
Could be next year.
Right.
Absolutely. But it still wouldn't affect the decision for the current fiscal year.
Right, but in the future.
Right.
Okay, I'm just still struggling. That's all I've got.
Timish.
Thank you. I appreciate just how hard our financial staff and you guys work on trying to help us, because we do know we have, money that we're getting back, and we're looking for creative ways to make sure that legally we're doing everything that we can. So the staff, if I'm listening to everything correctly, does not have a recommendation for us on this. You're just gonna lay out these two, and do you have one that, in your experience, which you've been across the state, and you're, as a CPA, what would you have a recommendation?
I think it's a good idea to move it to the general fund. I think, for the reasons already stated, I think that the board has the flexibility to set the tax rate in the INS fund, where the board does not have that flexibility, either under current law or anything I've heard discussed in the legislature. The board will not have that flexibility, at least for a couple of years, where it stands today. And so I think anything that we can do to legally move things to a place where the board has some flexibility makes a lot of sense to me.
Thank you.
And Ms. Timish, I agree with that. It would be my recommendation to do it.
Because this is a lot of information, and
It
I
is.
really appreciate,
Yeah.
with staff that has done this, and really understands. I think even just sometimes just those devils in the details, and I appreciate you looking at all those details for us. So thank you.
Any other follow-ups?
I do have one more. Are you gonna be able to give us the runs on what it would look like with the?
Yes,
Mr.
we'll
Martin, I
agree.
think, can
What'd you
give
just
us
say,
those.
You're gonna do us,
Yeah,
give them
I think
that
it's
by
out in
tonight,
the
too?
third decimal, like a .001. Yeah, so we have another scenario we could show you.
I would appreciate it, because it
So-
does add a
and-
cost if we do it.
So, to get direction, it's a work, we could do this, right? It's a workshop setting, so, what we want to come back with is the assignment that I'm hearing is we want to see a no tax rate increase, right? 0.3675. What does that look like? What's the par amount we can issue? That's number one to come back to you. Number two would be showing you these scenarios with and without the BAP subsidy in them, right? So show you these cash flows with and without.
Yes, sir.
Well,
and show it
well,
the
this
impact.
has it.
And we already have one.
That assumes, yeah.
You just need to
That
show
assumes it.
Without.
I'd like
Yeah,
it
we
without
pull
it.
it.
That's
Yes.
right.
If $500,000 goes away,
That's right.
what is it going to be on the tax rate?
But once again, for the vote that we're going to take next month is for this fiscal year.
Correct.
Not for, when you run those
Thank
runs,
you.
that is for next fiscal year.
Okay, so
Does that
No.
make,
do you want me to run it out assuming eternity?
No.
To 26 or just for 2020?
but
Does
that's
it-
not,
does it-
but we're doing it for fiscal year 2018-19, am I correct?
Yes, you
So what you all are asking for, it would be a decision we make next year.
That's true.
So does that not, if we do it this year, it does not impact next year's, just because we would lose the revenue that we would have received and put in INS to pay off?
Well, we have to remember that when we do these calculations, we are, even those calculations that we give the board in August, we're making some assumptions. We're assuming people are gonna actually pay the tax that the board levies. And
99% do.
we're assuming a collection rate, and we're assuming that the BAB subsidy is gonna stay where it is. Well, unforeseen things come along, and, you know, people sue and they win, and we have to pay refunds, and there's a lot of unknowns that continue throughout the year. And so certainly if the board wants to set it up where we wait till later in the year and see that, hey, we're gonna assume that we'll have the BAB subsidy until later in the year and realize, okay, we can move it to the general fund and it doesn't have any effect. That's certainly an option to consider. And in that case, you really wouldn't need a scenario, because you'd assume that the subsidy is going to be available for the rate, and then if it comes to pass that it's not needed and there wouldn't be any upward pressure on the rate, then that would be an annual decision the board could make.
And we could make that decision in August, right?
Yes.
Every year, just as
We
long as we
just
did
need
it
to
before
do
the
it
end of that fiscal year.
so we can get the
So we would know
transfer
what
done.
that impact, we would have already known what that impact would have been.
So Mike, going back to Mr. Martin's thing,
Assignment.
really, he doesn't need to run that scenario.
I wouldn't
It really
think
would be a
so.
waste of our time
Yeah.
for this, so you have just that one scenario.
So I just,
You got off.
Mr.
Can-
Miller's
can we
all
not
I-
run it,
That's all
though?
I have
Three,
to
six,
answer to.
7, 5 scenario.
Dr. Rogers,
Confused
can we
now
not run
because
it
I
so we
thought
can have
were
that
just told
information?
we needed to make the decision next month.
I would like it to be
And
able to make that
now-
decision next month.
We're not,
But it's for this year. We've
The-
already made this.
So you've already
This is
levied
just for
it.
this.
So
it's
I
only
think
for
what,
this
I think
year.
what Ms. Prosnick's saying is, we've already levied the
Yeah.
tax for the 18-19 year.
Right.
So what you're doing is you're voting basically to take that subsidy money out of the debt service fund and shift it over to the M&O.
That's all this is.
which is, Mike, that's what you were saying could be done next month.
We're-
That's
we're
why we
talking
should
about
do
doing
it next month.
But
not
you've got to
delay
do
it.
it before the end of the
Right.
fiscal.
Next Monday.
Do it, yes, so we're gonna do that, and then as it relates to the tax rate and the 19-20 sale, you guys will run some scenarios on that, or you've already run one, it includes $500,000 in it for payment for next year.
Everything that you have tonight includes or assumes that
Right.
interest
The
rate
subsidy stays
subsidy
in the
will
INS.
stay in the debt service fund.
And we can make that decision whether or not we still need that next August.
from now.
A
So
year
the-
from, a year from now.
So you can come back and see where you are.
Because we will have already, once again,
Great.
levied that
But-
tax and
So we're on a
collected.
year rotation, that makes sense, that's good.
But if we
That sounds
take
good.
the money out, how is it any longer in the fund?
We're just doing it 1 year.
Right.
We're just, we're.
Right, but how does that not impact how we are able to pay on this year?
Because we're almost paid for this.
Because we've
You've already levied the tax.
got more revenue. You have to remember, this I mean, I hate to say $500,000 is not a significant number,
Correct.
and I'm not saying that, but in
According
the
to-
grand scheme of
of our budget in
$140
general,
million
yes, I agree.
in bond payments, it's a very small percentage. And so I think when you look at the financial report it's in board book right now, I think you'll see that we've actually collected, if I'm not mistaken, we've collected more revenue in the debt service fund than what we had budgeted.
Because of interest rates.
No, because people are paying their taxes, and we've collected some delinquent taxes,
Even more than last year?
more than what was budgeted, I believe.
Oh, okay.
And so
But you're conservative
we're in
in nature.
pretty good shape in the debt service fund. But when we come to the board in August with a recommendation, we don't know all that. We have to assume that none of that good stuff is gonna happen.
Right.
And we have to recommend a tax rate that we know will bring in enough cash to make the payments.
And you all are available to continue answering questions, right, offline or
Absolutely.
email or something?
He knows where to find me.
Right, right.
All the time.
Okay, any other follow-up questions? I think this is a great idea. I really like the idea. My question is, when you're working out the budget, Mike, do you take in consideration the reduction? Because it looks like it's going to continue to keep dwindling down to pretty much nothing as a 6.9,
She's talking about the
6.2.
Sequestration.
Right.
Oh, well, sometimes we know what that percentage is, and sometimes we don't. If they don't release it in time, we just assume that the sequestration rate stays the same. It actually has gone down a little bit, which means they're paying us a little more than they have been. So if the trajectory stays the same, then
It did go up to as high as 8.2.
yeah,
I
it's
believe.
been much higher than it is now. And in fact, that schedule in there shows you.
Trust me, he will be conservative.
Yeah.
My other question was back to what Mrs. Sells asked is, can we earmark this money for something?
Absolutely. The board can earmark money for any legal purpose.
Okay, thank
That's
you.
a whole lot of work session.
Thank you, Mr. Martin.
Thank you.
Okay, next item, Mr. Ball, discuss potential LISD purchase of bus fleet.
Okay, in keeping with we didn't use the word buckets in the last item, but that's what we really were talking about. We were talking about the general fund bucket of money and the debt service fund bucket of money. And this is a discussion item to really just put out there some real numbers about the potential for the district to purchase its own bus fleet. As you know, our current arrangement with our contractor is that we spend about $15 million a year on contracted transportation services. And the way our contract is structured, some percentage of that $15 million is a payment for the acquisition of the buses themselves, because we have 288 school buses of various sizes and dimensions that were all purchased brand new when we initiated the contract with First Student. So obviously they're having to recover the cost of that capital over some time period. What we don't know, they're not going to disclose to us what their assumptions are about how quickly they need to recover that capital. And so what we've done here is we've provided a scenario that lists three different time periods. And the first one in yellow says we would assume that we would recover the capital over a 12-year period, because that's typically about the maximum life that you'd want to stretch out the life of a school bus. And so in that scenario, and we're also assuming that the purchase of 288 buses at $110,000 per bus, that's a total investment of $31,680,000. And those assumptions are the same on each of these three scenarios. We're assuming an interest rate of 4.5%. And you saw that's probably a little high, considering the true interest cost that Mr. Martin just showed. But it's likely that a transaction involving just buses would command a little higher interest rate than a bond sale would. So if you assume a 12-year payback of your capital, that would be a semi-annual payments of $1,722,766 over 20 semi-annual payments. That's 24 semi-annual payments. That'd be a 12-year payback. So those two semi-annual payments would represent about 22, just a hair under 23% of the $15 million contract that we would be paying, that we're currently paying for our transportation. So the idea here is we could reduce our costs out of the general fund by almost 23% there if we did it over, if we assumed a 12-year recovery of that capital. Did everybody follow that?
Yep.
Okay. So if you move to the middle scenario, that's a 10-year payback. Same facts, everything's the same except the payback period. Now that's about 26.46% of the $15 million. And so that, if you assume you're gonna recover all your capital in 7 years, then you've reduced your $15 million payment out of the general fund by 26%. So the idea here is it's the same concept we were just talking about. The idea is to take the capital costs and put them over into the debt service fund and leave the board the flexibility there that the board doesn't have in the general fund. And it would help hopefully contribute towards some solutions to our general fund budget situation. And so then the pink category, the far right one, same facts, just a 7-year payback period. Now we're reducing the annual cost by 35.5%. So now you're talking about a little over a third of your cost could be moved from the general fund to the debt service fund, which gives the board, it helps relieve pressure on the general fund budget, and it gives the board flexibility in the future to levy the tax that it would take to on an ongoing basis replace those buses. And so this is one of the ideas that came about, again, in the context of our, under current law, the context of our $27 million budget deficit. We've been looking for ways that we could solve the budget dilemma with the least impact on kids. And this, I would submit that this scenario would have zero impact on kids, but it could move those costs over to the general, from the general fund to the debt service fund. And so that's really, this is just sort of a conceptual framework for hopefully future discussions. And we don't have a lot of details right now, but I think the timing, the reason we're bringing this up at this point is our contract for transportation is up for bid. We'll publish the bid probably this fall sometime, late fall, and it'll be an action item for the board.
First term, 5 years, there's an option for renewal.
Right, but our plan is to bid it.
Right.
And so
Our plan is to bid it.
And so this would, if the board is,
Next year.
if the board is thinking that purchasing its own fleet would be a good idea, then we would need to build that into the request for proposals, and we'd be seeking proposals to maintain the fleet to our specifications, provide the drivers, provide everything that our current contractor is providing now, with the exception of the cost of the buses. So that's really we just wanted to kind of introduce this concept, give you some numbers we think are based on reality of what we would need and the actual impact that it would have on our contract. And so
we wanted to just put this on your radar. We really, I mean, of course, we'll take, you know, any questions, but I mean, it's very preliminary, but we wanted to at least start to move the ball a little forward. So.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ball. Mr. Miller?
I think this is a great idea, and it sounds like you answered one of my questions, which was we would do this at the timing of the new contract, whether it's with the existing provider or another provider. We would essentially buy these, whether they're the existing buses from the current provider or somebody else. We would buy these buses. We own those assets, and then we would hire somebody to run them, maintain them, etc.
absolutely correct.
Yes, sir, and I think, you know, what we'll need direction from the board well before the bids go out is we'll need to know if we're gonna purchase our own fleet or not, because that will be part of the
Yes.
need when we go out to bid, that
Right.
we're looking for
What
management.
mechanism can we use to buy the fleet? I mean, are we, to get to that 4.5%, are we talking about selling bonds, using bond money for that?
It's a great question, Mr. Miller, and I think we'll be in a much better position to talk about that at a future date. But I think we have some thinking along those lines that I think it would be premature for us to throw those out publicly at this point.
Yeah, we can discuss that in a closed session in the future meeting.
I have no further questions.
Ms. Lazan? I have no questions right now. Ms. Prosnick?
So my question is just on the $110,000, kind of like, is that a new bus? Is that a used bus?
That's a new bus.
Okay. And is there any option to buy the fleet from our current
We have,
contractor?
certainly there could be, we have had discussions with them. They certainly have a willingness to sell them to us. We were not pleased with the price that was quoted, so they were, we were a long ways apart on the price. Let's just leave it at that. It was a significantly higher than what we had thought it should be.
Okay. That's all.
Ms. Hassett?
So you said the maintenance cost would be built into the vendor contract? So we would not absorb
Yes.
maintenance costs within this?
That's right.
We would, well, we'd be paying for the maintenance, but we would contract for them to maintain the buses to our specifications.
Just a question, since I haven't done this before, would this have any impact negatively on our first report on how we're transferring? Because we've had little hiccups.
No, I don't think this would impact our first report. I think it would, if to the extent that it reduces a budget deficit, it would have a positive impact on the first report.
Okay. And aren't the sale of buses one of the things that we can actually put back into M&O, even if they're purchased with bond funds?
If they're purchased with bond funds, we could not put them back into M&O.
It's not one of the
We would
exclusionary-
have to put those back into a projects fund is the legal word that's used in the bond covenants.
Okay.
And use them only for items that are eligible for bond funding.
That's all.
Ms. Timish?
How long are buses usually on the road safely for children?
It varies from district to district, but the reason, it's no accident that those three numbers, it varies from, I'd say, a low end of 7 years to a high end of about 12 years is what you see across the state.
And is that 12 years, is that like rural districts, or are you mainly looking at districts like our size?
It may vary, and that's you would look at that in terms of a fleet average. And so 12 years is stretching it. I mean, you'd be hard pressed to get every bus to run 12 years. But then on the other hand, you might get one to run 15, just depending on how they're used and how they're maintained. But
I will tell you, Ms. Timish, that with our previous contract, I mean, there were 10 to 12-year buses that were used all the time. I mean, so,
I just,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I appreciate that, I just wanted to make sure, cause
Yeah.
like that in-town driving, I mean,
yeah.
yeah, I just wanted to, then, would, if we started purchasing these in-house and did all this in-house, would that create any type of need for facilities or any other in-house buildings to accommodate that?
The buses are currently being maintained in our facilities. The thing that we don't have is just the tools and things to do it ourselves, because we've not worked on our own buses in pretty close to 30 years in our district, and so what we provide to the contractor is the garage itself where the work is done, and an air compressor, and they provide pretty much everything else. And so and we would not anticipate that changing. We would still want to build into our request for proposals the same maintenance that they're doing now. They're just maintaining their own equipment now. What we would have to build into our RFP are some metrics on, okay, you got to change the oil this often, and you got to, those kind of things, which we didn't have to do when they're maintaining their own equipment.
So currently, the facilities that we have would easily translate to being all in-house, is what you're saying? Like, just, we wouldn't need more buildings, we wouldn't need anything to accommodate how everything's running?
That part of it, I would think would be very seamless, because they're maintaining the buses in our facilities now. And so whether it's First Student or whether it's someone else, that would be part of the RFP for them to provide the mechanics and the equipment needed to maintain those buses to our specifications.
Okay, thank you.
Y'all cannot hear?
We can't hear when they're asking questions.
Can we turn the mics up a little bit more, please?
It's mostly Rhonda's, I think.
If we speak
Ms.
into the
Timish?
mic more carefully, we can't hear Ms. Hassett and Ms.
I don't know that mine's
Maybe
on.
Thank you.
Bring the mic closer too.
Is that good?
We're sorry.
I have no more questions.
Thank you, Ms. Timish. Okay, so my question, I love this idea. Oh, Ms. Hill, sorry.
No, I didn't have any because you all already asked all the questions. So, thank you.
I'm so sorry. Okay, so my question is, I think this is a great idea, is feasibly, of your three scenarios, what could the district cover in their budget? Do you have an answer, or would be something we need to really look at?
Well, I think the question really about the time that the contractors are assuming for recovery of the capital hopefully would come to light when we get the proposals. That what would they agree to do it for without the capital cost, and I think we'll know a little bit better. We may never know exactly what they've been assuming because we don't know what their interest costs are and that sort of thing, but I think we'll have a little better idea, and that's why I've tried to express it in terms of a percentage of the cost that we could save, because if it's currently costing us $15 million, and the new proposal is they'll do it for $10 million. If we provide the buses, then we know about a third of it was the cost of that capital.
My other question is, do you know what a time frame is on getting a bus?
Takes about 6 months from the time a PO is issued for delivery of the bus. So I think what our timeline would look like is we would need to have a decision from the board before we issue our RFP this fall, and then we need to actually order those buses for delivery next summer, and just build that into our new contract with either our existing contractor or another one.
So they would be sitting for a while? The buses-
Well, we'd schedule the delivery sometime during the summer. So yes, they'd be sitting during the summer months, which they typically would be
Right.
anyway.
Okay. No further questions. Okay, Mr. Ball. It's your night.
Okay.
Update on the recommendations related to hazardous bus routes.
And this is simply just an update on the process. If you recall, we had our manager of contract services, which was Miss Brassfield, was here last year, and she brought us a rubric that is used widely across the state, and so we got feedback from the board at that time, and based on that feedback, we've made adjustments to the rubric, which you have on your board book document. The items that have been added based on the feedback from the board are highlighted in yellow there, and we actually used some locally developed items out of the town of Flower Mound's documents and some Denton County documents, I believe, and so hopefully it's got a little bit of a better local flavor to it, and it is just another iteration of a document that's used statewide with some locally developed items. And then the plan was that Ms. Brassfield would physically go and review every route. Well, being the great public servant that she is, she completed that work before she left at the end of February. And so we have that work, we have all of the completed rubrics, but since her departure, we've just been trying to survive in transportation, and so we've had an interim in that position. Ms. McDonald has done a great job of filling in with some of the communication issues that have been there and dealing with parents and principals. And we have Mr. Turner coming on board as soon as his duties are concluded at his middle school. And our hope is to be able to really go back and review the work that Micah did and be in a position to really discuss it from a very informed position with the board. The other thing that's gone on related to hazardous routes is sending out communications to the parents of everyone who rides on a hazardous route, saying, hey, just FYI, this bus route is, it's not required that service be provided here. We're doing it because this route is deemed, the walking path would be deemed to be a hazardous route, and so the district's providing transportation, and hey, just so you know, those routes are reevaluated on an annual basis. I think those parents have already received one of those letters, and there's another one scheduled to go out before school's out. Ms. McDonald, I believe, is working on that presently. And so we really wanted to just provide this updated rubric to the board and get any feedback the board has on this as we move forward with bringing the actual recommendations to the board about what those routes look like. What we have realized is that we are going to have some decisions to present some recommendations to the board simply because there have been changes based on the Mill Street construction and the redrawing of lines that have been associated with that, and also the Hedrick retirement of that campus and the redrawing of the lines that have been an outgrowth of that. So we will have some new routes to present to the board for the board's action, and the policy and state law do require that these routes be approved by the board annually, and so that'll be coming to the board at a future meeting. And we really tonight just wanted to give you an update on the process and receive any feedback the board might have related to that.
Thank you, Mr. Ball. Ms. Lasan.
So this is not, this is just, you're just presenting the rubric. We're not making any decisions.
That's
by
right.
any. It's just in that case, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Ms. Prosney.
Yes, could we get the documentation from Flower Mound, like what consists red, what's orange, what's green, what's yellow? There's no documentation to provide like what that what that means, what Flower Mound
Yeah,
considers.
we can get that. I know Mr.
Yeah.
Garrett, worked with Ms. Brassfield to get that. I will tell you, some cities were not very forthcoming. They didn't want to share, or they didn't really have a mechanism in place, so we were grateful that a few, the county and the town of Flower Mound, were willing to share, but we'll get that from Mr. Garrett and share it. I think our plan, going back to what Mr. Ball talked about, is to discuss these and then bring it forward in June. Is that?
Well, I think the colors here are colors off of their map.
Yeah.
And then to the left of it, like the red is heavy traffic at all times. The orange is heavy rush hour traffic normal.
Well, but
And
that
so-
was something that we discussed, that Ms. Timisha brought up, that's a perception.
And the flower mound would be a map of flower
I'm
mound.
that's
right.
just gonna pertain to Flower
Yes.
Mound.
That's correct.
Okay, I'm sorry, the impression was that was gonna pertain
No,
to
I'm sorry.
the district.
Yeah.
And then my next question is, on this rubric, can you check more than one box in a category? For example, let's pretend it's a railroad crossing with a 4-lane highway. So do you get both the points for railroad crossing and the points for a 4-lane highway, or do you just get one per category?
Well, I think the answer could be yes. I mean, obviously, a rubric like this is somewhat subjective, and so I think that's our plan was to use this rubric or something like it, depending on the board's input. And some of these routes are just going to be they're black and white. It's obviously hazardous or it's obviously not hazardous. The ones that fall into this scoring category down at the bottom, which is less than 500 points, is not hazardous. 500 to 574 is what we're calling gray areas. Those we would send a second or a third individual out to independently look at those, and then so that 2 or 3 people are in agreement that it's one way or the other, and then above 575 is obviously hazardous. So that's been the kind of the thinking. And Micah she scored all the routes, and so what we've yet to do is send the second and third person to look at those that came into the gray category. And so we certainly have that flexibility, and we want that flexibility because we want to be sure that when we stand in front of the board making a recommendation about these routes, that it's the right thing to do for kids, and that it's the right thing to do for our community, and that more than just one person has looked at it and concurs that this is the recommendation we need to make.
I did notice that obstructed sidewalks is no longer on the list. It was on the previous rubric, and I was just curious what the thinking on that was.
And I can't answer that, but we can certainly add it back if the board feels like that's an item that needs to be on there.
That's all I got.
We had also talked about a safety type element, adding it to the rubric. Are we not adding a safety type element?
I think what you see here is the rubric that was used. We certainly can add that.
We had talked about some of the areas that might be, especially for little ones, more high crime.
Oh, well, I'm glad you mentioned that. The rubric is simply for the traffic conditions.
Okay.
The violence is what's the term that's used in the law, and we've not, that's a separate thing from this rubric. What we've done is work with Mr. Garrett to communicate with the various law enforcement agencies to determine are any of our bus stops in an area where there's been a high crime rate that the law enforcement would think are too high risk for that kind of situation, for a school bus stop. And we've not had any of our routes so identified as of this point.
But then if you did, you would figure out how to evaluate it in conjunction with
I think we don't have a rubric for that. It's Mr. Garrett's consultation with law enforcement, I think, is our.
We just have to deal with it on a specific
Yeah.
case-by-case scenario and
Okay.
get the law enforcement involved and see what they suggest.
Okay. That's all.
Ms. Timish?
To clarify what Ms. Sass was asking, for a specific bus stop or for walking a route where there might be considered violent? Because I misunderstood. Well, I mean, I'm just, right, I wasn't sure, because you answered it one way when I thought you were asking it differently.
I would submit that it's both. It's both, particularly the bus stop where there's a group of kids gathered, as well as the routes that they would need to take through the neighborhood. Because, the crime data is not going to be at a bus stop. It's going to be in the neighborhood. So I think
That apartment complex.
yeah, at that level.
So when we do this rubric, is this something that's obviously probably in partnership with Mr. Garrett, and he kind of looks at any areas to ask each town, is there a concern that maybe we're not aware of, or we just are aware of it because we know? I'm just wondering what that partnership looks like with our.
The rubric is about the traffic conditions, and it doesn't attempt to deal with the violence portion of what's in the law. And I hate to keep using that word, but that's the word in the law. And that portion of the determination is about Mr. Garrett's communication with the law enforcement. They know where the high crime areas are, and so I think that's really just a conversation between Mr. Garrett and the various law enforcement agencies across the district.
Thank you.
If I may, it's about the area immediately around the stop. So it is kind of both. It's not, if the bus stop is a specific address, it's not addressing the rate of crime at that specific address, but in the area, immediately surrounding that, where students would be likely going. It doesn't anticipate a specific pedestrian path because there's 100 different pedestrian paths that kids take to get from any point A to point B. So, but when they do look at that, it does go beyond just the immediate bus stop. I hope that provides some clarification.
Thank you. Ms. Sells?
Y'all have it once again. Most of my questions. The only thing I had was they just check the boxes of the speed limits of major roads to be crossed. Those are just boxes to be checked. There's no
Their boxes.
right. Walking alongside. There's not any determination of how much of the walking would be alongside versus.
Separated by a.
You know what I mean? Like if you're walking a mile and 0.75, but only 0.10 of a mile is walking along a 45 or a 35 mile per hour road, I guess I would like, and I guess, do we see the routes?
Yes.
Absolutely.
We
There's,
see the routes, and so we would be able to determine that. I just wish that there would be some way that would be highlighted when we're looking at the routes, that where these numbers fell could be highlighted, so that if we wanted to go out and view, we understood where the rubric was applied.
what's,
Well, I think, but if any portion of that route is 45 miles an hour, I mean, it's gonna get the highest point total.
right.
So, which is, so
And-
I
That's
think
just
that's
a checkbox.
Yeah,
And you-
that's just a checkbox, and the highest number of benefits that becoming a hazardous route because
I still
we're
would like,
getting to that.
when we're looking at those things, have the perspective of the person scoring.
And we have, there are maps that are color-coded with the neighborhood that's included, that would be served by a route, if there were to be a route. And so you can see exactly the streets, the neighborhoods, and this rubric is applied to what the walking path would look like for those students who live in that color-coded area.
And I think that's where, though, last time there was some discussion on, are the kids going this way or are they going that way? And so for me, once again, I want to see the perspective of the person,
think there's some legal requirements of how you determine the walking path, because I don't think you can measure it according to every possible walking path. I think there's a legal requirement.
It's the shortest distance on a public roadway from your driveway to the driveway of the school that's how the 2 mile test is applied.
For my neighborhood, I would know that. For a neighborhood in Flower Mound, I may not know that, and that's why I'm just asking.
And that would be different for literally every house in the neighborhood. Potentially, it could be different.
Anything else? Mr. Miller?
No questions.
So, Mr. Ball, I have a question regarding the routes, and a comment. I appreciate Ms. Brasfield very much going out to every single route, and it's a godsend. I really appreciate that. So 2 questions is, how often do we do that? I would hope that she's was doing a midpoint, not just once a year and checking the routes.
Well, we do them annually. Because the board is required to take action on the hazardous routes annually. We also, throughout the year, keep up with where there is construction. I mean, the things that change the routes are construction, new developments, road construction, those kinds of things. And so, as those things are happening, we get notified of those things. We either get notified ahead of time or we see it through the windshield that those things are happening. And so those are the opportunities for us to really review. And maybe there was construction in a neighborhood last year and it's finished now, and last year it was hazardous and now it's not because the sidewalks are finished or whatever that may be. So there is an ongoing review process. I don't know that it's a set schedule. It's every so often, but it's as those situations happen, that's our clue to we need to reevaluate that route.
So that was my main question, is with all the construction going on in all of our cities, at what, I guess the cities notify you, that was my question, is
they do, but we've also got buses circulating through there as people move in, and so we find out that way. But most of the time,
I'm not talking about a new construction. I'm talking about, let's just say, for instance, in Flower Mound, they're tearing up sagebrush right now.
Right.
And
We
the
get
sidewalks.
we get notified.
So then you would send a bus
We do.
out? You would start a bus route like mid-year, or how does that work?
We could, if the construction caused it to be hazardous so that the kids couldn't walk that path, yes, we could. I can't think of a situation where we've done that, but certainly we
Just
could.
curious.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Ball, guaranteed maximum price for Hebron High School multi-purpose facility.
Hopefully Mr. Fight's making his way up, and Mr. Hughes to the microphone. I think the next 2 or 3 items are guaranteed maximum prices for various projects. This one is the Hebron High School multipurpose facility, indoor athletic center, and practice field redesign. And with that, that got enough time for Mr. Fight and Mr. Hughes to get to the microphone.
All right. Yeah. So this is the project that we got to show you guys last month. The design of the multi-purpose indoor athletic center. It also includes the tennis court relocation and the practice fields. And so this project is in budget. And any questions you have, I'd be happy to answer.
Okay, Ms. Prosnick.
Can't wait to see it.
Ms. Hassett?
No questions.
Ms. Timish? Mr. Miller?
I'd just like to make a point of clarification. And I'm not taking a hard position on this, but I think last time when I brought up that not every school had 2 practice fields, I was jumped on. But to be clear, most schools have 2 practice fields that are far from each other. So Lewisville and Marcus, as an example, to use 2 practice fields, you have to go a long distance. In fact, you have to cross the road. In fact, for younger students, you have to ride a bus. And so I just want people to understand that when they talk about equity, that this does not promote equity because we have an inequitable element on the other side where people have had to go a long way to use these facilities. And why do I bring that up as it relates to the Hebron facility? The fact is that one of our big issues on the Hebron footprint is parking. So we're looking at retaining some land across the way for parking. You could actually put a practice field over there and take and create a great amount of parking on the main campus by moving one of those practice fields. It would alleviate a lot of the day-to-day activities. Now, I know we're not going to do that, but just understand that's how we remediated some of that with other schools. And so this is going beyond what we've done at some other schools and doing some great things. But understand that we're not fixing one of our primary things, one of our big issues we get complaints about, which is we're adding a little bit of parking, but not a lot of parking as it relates to Friday night events, especially multi-night or events at a single night. So that's just my comments on this one.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Ms. Lasan?
No comments.
Ms. Prosnick? Sorry. I don't have any comments either. I'm very excited about this. Okay, Mr. Ball?
Okay, the next item is the guaranteed maximum price for the Forest Vista Playground Replacement Project. And this project is a little over the cost estimates that we provided at the time of the bond package, and the reason for that is it's all stated in the item, but I just want to call your attention to it. The cost estimates were done assuming that it'd be a like for like exchange. What we were unaware of at the time is there's some drainage issues there, and new standards require a little more space than what's there, and so there's some concrete work that has to be done and a French drain that has to be put in. So even though it's a little bit over the cost estimate that was originally provided, there are some cost savings on some of the other projects such that we still believe we can do this and stay within the total bond budget. So with that said, I'll hopefully did the hard part and turn the rest of it over to Mr. Fide.
That's all I have. I'll answer any questions you guys have. Yeah.
Ms. Timmons?
So just to clarify, the teacher shelter and the basketball goals, those will be moved and they'll still get to have use of those facilities?
Yes, ma'am. So that's part of the extra cost is the relocation and the demo of the concrete, and then the need for a French drain.
Is the teacher shelter something that's standard at every playground? I'm just trying to figure out, is that something the PTA did, or is that, I just have never heard of that term before.
So for years when playgrounds were put in, there was a standard teacher shelter that was put in. Now that is not standard across the entire district, because when we were putting those in, or when the district was putting those in over those years, not all of those playgrounds got that particular teacher shade. So you're right. In some elementary schools, the PTA has provided some teacher shades, and we've rebuilt those and maintained those over years. And then there was a number of years that the district was actually providing those with the playground. And so some of those have that particular model of playground shade.
Okay, so when you say teacher shade, because I'm imagining a lot of the playgrounds that I've tried, it's actually over the equipment, but the teachers aren't playing on the slides, so where are we shading it?
You're exactly right. So that is the playground equipment shade, and you're exactly right. So that's the big canvas shade. These are more smaller, like typically 8 by 10 little shade structures over like a bench, where the teachers can get out of the sun during the recess times.
Okay, and I know this is it required by like ADA to provide a water fountain or water feature or something to drink out of at every playground? Is that something we provide? Like, it seems to be hit or miss.
No, it's not. It's not something that we provide as a standard currently,
so
and it's not required by any regulatory agency that I'm aware of.
Ms. Sells? Mr. Miller?
Ms. Sells has no questions, and I have no questions.
Ms. Lasan?
I have no questions.
Right, Mrs. Sells? No questions?
Ms. Prosnick?
Okay, so Ms. Timish has now raised questions for me. So what are our ed specs when it comes to playgrounds and teacher shelters?
So on a new facility, the playground itself is provided. The border of the playground obviously the 5-bar, the landing material, and the teacher shelter is provided. What's not provided, and what's been talked about many times, and is always provided by the PTA, is the shade structure over the playground. And whether, I believe it was provided on one new campus, which was Kamey Elementary. And the question has come up many times: should it be part of the new construction? And so that's, I mean, we can always add that with new facilities if the board so desires, and make that change in the ed spec, or clarify that in the ed spec that is provided.
So when a PTA provides, I'm going to go with the teacher shelter. I've never seen one. I assume they exist. If the PTA provides it, can I ask why then the district feels the need to re-provide it?
So we haven't had a PTA teacher shelter built
Okay.
in several years. But, to your question, a lot of times as these different items are approved, they come through a process and they're approved by the district for that, and then the district kind of takes that on to maintain over time. That we will maintain those items, and so a lot of it has been, rebuilding and maintaining these teacher shelters over time. As Randy said, the teacher shelter being part of the ed spec, we feel like we would provide that if we're taking it down.
Are the basketball courts part of the ed spec?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm gonna go on the ed specs as well. So we're adding something that we haven't put in the ed specs. Am I understanding that correctly?
Which element?
The,
Teacher shelter is part of the ed spec.
Correct. Yeah, we would provide a teacher shelter on a new playground. It's the shade structure over the playground equipment itself that's not provided.
Okay.
That's the piece that typically is provided by the PTA in recent years.
And that is a great question. I think that the board probably needs to discuss and decide in the future, because some campuses have no problems with their PTA providing a canopy or whatever for over their playground, and those are not cheap, and
Right.
some PTAs will never be able to raise the funds for that. And so if you're not careful, you will have even the have and have-nots even on the playground.
Yeah, so it definitely needs to be a discussion for the board. Okay, no other questions. So the next one is the guaranteed maximum price of Colony High School entry. Mr. Ball?
I don't really, I think Mr. Fight probably and Mr. Hughes can.
Okay. All right, so this is another project that we were able to show you guys last month, mainly the entry reconfiguration. In conjunction with that is the limited refresh, similar to Marcus, some tack wall, door replacements, flooring. The PLAM in the hallways is already done on the Colony, so that's one big difference from Marcus. As the action item states, basically we are within budget. However, we are bringing an extra item to you for consideration and possible approval, and that is the elevator, the condition of the elevator at the Colony High School, and really I'll let Jason speak to any questions that you have regarding the elevator. The elevator was not typically an item that was tracked on the facilities assessment, and so as such it wasn't on our radar to be part of that limited refresh. However, there have been issues at the campus, and discussing that internally and with core construction, we feel like adding an allowance of $150,000, we will be able to address the elevator, make sure that it functions properly and well for the students at the Colony. And so that's kind of what we're laying out here. Is we have the GMP for the project as sold in the bond, the Colony High School entry reconfiguration and limited renovation, but we are also recommending that we add the elevator refurbish to the project.
Not a refurbished one, a new elevator.
Really quickly, in the original assessment document, we did not have elevators pulled out individually for assessment. The reason for that is because we at the time have always assumed, really until recently, that elevators were a lifetime building component, meaning that elevators are meant to last the entire life of the building itself. since that time, and with some of the stuff in the news, and a lot of districts are talking about it, I actually was able to meet with some of our peer districts, and we've had some issues with different elevators. And so what we'd like to do, and what we're trying to do for this next assessment version, is to actually pull those elevators out and actually assess them individually, so that moving forward we can be more, provide more predictive maintenance on those versus reactive maintenance, which is kind of what we've done since the beginning of the district, I'm assuming. And so that being said, we will have that added to the assessment document, the next version of the document. And what we're right now in the process of reviewing and providing assessments for all of those elevators and determining exactly what the life cycle span for those are, reviewing all of the work order history. And speaking with some of our peer districts, it seems like a lot of them are moving in that direction and trying to replace these on more of a life cycle schedule, not necessarily the life of the building schedule.
And there have been, Jason, there have been problems.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes, sir.
some serious problems with this.
We've had problems, recurring problems with that elevator. We've had a lot of maintenance and replacement of the different parts. It is an original 1986 elevator for the building. And so, over time, we do regular monthly inspections, we do annual inspections, and so those have just been maintained, regular intervals over the years, but at some point, you really do need a major overhaul and pretty much replacement of those parts.
So the elevator, how many elevators are we talking about replacing in the building?
Just one.
Just one?
Yes.
Okay. And so, and this is a little bit off topic, but I wondered, have we ever done, or do we ever do like groundbreaking for things when we build them? Because I know that the colony's super excited about this, and I don't want to create more work, but just, it seems like when you do a groundbreaking, there's a lot of great press release, and then you dig a little shovel, and then, but the community really gets excited about it when you have an opportunity just to see the mayor there and see some city council, and then and it's just kind of like we're kicking it off and it's officially started. You probably know best that answer. I just wonder, like at Tech West,
Yeah, no, I think it's a great idea. The only time I can remember it being done was for Flower Mound 9, but I think certainly even more so in the colony, who's extremely excited about this project. I think it makes sense, and so I'll look over there to Ms. Brown, and she can coordinate with Mr. Fike and try to get some of those.
Because I just was thinking, I wish retroactively, I was like, Tech West and Mill Street, because every time I drive, I like literally get in the left lane and drive as slow as I can to make sure nobody's behind me, to just look at what's going on at Tech West. I'm so excited about that.
Yeah, we
And
did
so,
for Griffin, that's right.
We've done it for other schools.
but just, there doesn't seem to be a consistent pattern, but I just feel like when we have an opportunity just to see that, the media picks it up, and I think it's just we're doing it. We're doing what we said we were gonna do, and I think it's a great way to put a foot forward.
Yeah. Okay.
So Ms. Grimm, that'll be added to your schedule. That'll be awesome.
Well, I think if it, this is one, I respect the discussion here, but I think we've got to come up with something, not just we ask for it and Amanda goes and does something. I mean, we have done ribbon cuttings for new facilities, right? So if we're going to change that practice, I think we need to talk about it.
But I'm not asking to change the practice, respectfully, Mr. Miller. I'm just asking, putting a shovel in the ground. I'm not asking for a ribbon cutting. Like you're just, starting the project. It's just, I still expect that we would have a ribbon cutting when the building opens.
I think
It's a groundbreaking, and it's common
we probably
practice.
do need some guidelines though, because do you do a groundbreaking for $150,000 playground reno, or
No.
So I think that's what Mr. Miller.
Yes, I agree.
So we'll come up with some standards on what I think we need to do groundbreakings for major projects, and so we just need to determine what's a major project.
And that's all I'm asking,
Yeah.
just for the consideration of the board.
Ms. Sells.
And I would just piggyback on that, because I think that, we have community members that don't even know that Tech West is being built right now, that are still complaining about, that we need trade schools and things, and it's there and it's coming, and we just, even though we talk about it, there's still that element of disconnect. So just trying to incorporate my only question is if we've had issues with this, and have we had any ADA violations?
ADA violations with the elevator?
Well, with the Americans with Disabilities Act, have we?
With the elevator.
With the
Yeah, with
elevator
the elevator.
specifically? No, ma'am, we have not had ADA. Typically, we'll have emergency POs put on, and we get it repaired just as quickly as possible. And of course, they understand that things are going to break down, and with only one elevator, that's kind of built in, where they understand you're going to have times when the elevator is down. But we have not had a period long enough where it has caused us to have any kind of issues with the state
Or violations?
on that.
Okay, and I'm supposing this is probably a question for staff, that our staff at that school, in case that elevator was, we have protocols in place to get students off the second floor.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, Mr. Garrett and Miss Vincelette, 3-4 years ago, we purchased those back chairs for every campus. So.
Okay, that was my only question.
And you typically don't use the elevator anyway in an emergency.
No.
Right,
Yeah,
but in
but
case
other
a student
times.
was injured or
Yeah.
something that was
Yeah.
physically disabled and needed.
And they were on the
quick
second
way,
floor when it
yes.
broke down. Yeah, absolutely.
Mr. Miller?
I think the visibility around Tech W, it's a great thing for the marketing plan. So whether we did groundbreaking or not, I think this is one where we should remind people that it's coming. And I know that's not on the agenda, so I'll move on. $150,000, we got to fix the elevator, no brainer. But where is this then in the GMP against the budget we put together for the plan that went to the voters? Are we still going to come under?
No, what they're saying is it's going to be a little above.
But
Without the elevator.
It's $148,514 above the estimate that we provided.
But it's above the GMP or above the estimate we provided?
Total estimate, right?
That we provided before we got the GMPs?
The GMP is above the estimate that we provided by
With the
140
elevator.
with the elevator, but
Got it.
without the elevator, it would be under the estimate.
Okay, so the $4.954 million was the budget kind of plan, and now the GMP is going to move to 5.1, basically.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Mrs. Hahn?
I have no questions. I have a couple. So what is the lifetime of an elevator? I know that you all had assumed the lifetime of a building. I'm just curious what the lifetime of an elevator is.
So that's a great question. So as we're doing our assessments and we're looking at data from a lot of different sources, we're trying to determine that right now. So as we're building our assessment document, currently as we speak, every day, we're trying to determine what that life cycle is going to be. There's a lot of groups that don't necessarily agree, but what we're seeing is that it needs a major renovation. Kind of what we're seeing with a lot of our building components within the 20 to 25 year range is what we're seeing right now.
So do elevators not come with what I call like a warranty for a certain number? I mean,
They
just
do.
as a guide?
They do, but it's not nearly that term. Not even close. And so it wouldn't be close to that.
And then my only other question is, does this estimate include the backlit TC on the front of the building?
Yes, ma'am.
They've added electricity?
Yes,
Because they didn't
yeah.
have
Yeah.
electricity.
Right, we'll get that in there.
Just, the glow of the TC.
Anything else you want in there?
That was one of my questions, was that. And then I guess semantically, they're not replacing the elevator, just the parts within? Because they don't have to try to take the elevator out.
So that's all the components we're going to be reviewing in depth as part of this. It will definitely be all of the mechanical parts and pieces, and potentially the cab itself, the actual elevator, if that's what you're asking. It could
Yes.
potentially be the entire cab. That's what we're going to be reviewing.
How can they get it in and out without destroying the
Again, that's all going to be part of that review. Part of that
They
review
can do
process. Yeah, they can do
Got
it.
a welding class.
Yeah.
I mean, but it has to come out of the
Taxi.
school too, and there's no magical
Yes.
elevator door that it could.
A lot of those elevators, if you can imagine, they actually are put together by panel system. And so every wall is its own panel, and it's kind of constructed, if you can imagine, within the elevator shaft itself. So it can come out, and it may be some, some destructive pieces of that, but it would be, selective and small in nature to get that in and out. But again, that's all. I'm not saying that's going to happen. It's just all going to be part of that
Possible
review.
after you evaluate.
Yes.
That's all.
Ms. Timish? I'm getting all confused, sorry. Okay, so, just two things to bring up. I definitely want to replace the elevator by all means. But in regards to Mrs. Timish's comment about the grand openings and the shovel and all that, I really would like to see, especially at Hedrick, the renderings put up. Everybody's asking and questioning. I would love to see that at the Colony. I think people get excited when they see what's to come. So it'd be nice if we had an easel or something with the renderings at these facilities that are getting new campuses, College Street, etc. That's just my comment on that. The other thing is, regarding feasibility studies, the elevator was something you thought of. Is there anything else that you think, okay, we should probably be doing feasibility studies on these things as well? Because I'd really like that all put together as we look at that.
From the original assessment document, we probably added a handful to 10 items additionally from the original document over the last, this will be our third revision. And so as we're thinking of items, we're adding those items. One of the items just off the top of my hand is like the boilers that operate the kitchens, the big water heater system. So there's a lot of things like that we're catching as we go. We think we've got them all. I mean, I'd like to say yes, we've got them all, but the elevator, again, wasn't part of the feasibility study because we've always thought that they were a lifetime component and that we would just regularly maintain those, make them last the life cycle of the building. And what we're seeing now is that you can do that. You can certainly do that. We've done it since the beginning. But we feel like we'll get a lot better service if we're proactive and replace some of these major components and do these major overhauls on a more scheduled time frame. And we're just trying to determine exactly what that schedule is.
Well, I think you're looking at the safety aspect of
Yes.
it too, so that's very important. That's why I asked the question.
So, Jason, I know, y'all update the ed specs every year, and, of course, that changes the score of,
Yes, assessment document, yes.
But could you maybe every year when you do that, just anything that you added to the ed spec, just notify the board in
Absolutely.
an email, or we can do it through weekly update or something, just to where they'll know,
Certainly.
hey, we added these three
Well, on the
things.
front of that report page, you
Yeah.
could certainly,
Right.
Yeah.
like on the very front of the report, it could be added
Because then you
this year. Yes, you could
Yeah.
go back and look.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely.
All right.
Okay. Yeah, I don't either. Mrs. Hall, I think you actually get a break.
Thanks, guys.
Technology report, Mr. Colbeck.
All right, thank you, Ms. Cox. This is a project that was in the 2017 bond technology
Pull
list.
it a little closer.
Sure. This is a project that was in the 2017 bond technology list. The wireless presentation tool for classrooms is essentially the Apple TVs we use to present wirelessly. Last year, June 4th, I presented the recommendation to put the year one devices in. We've got those all installed. We're bringing this forward to bring the year two recommendation for additional Apple TVs. We'll be working with purchasing to get the pricing and bring that forward to a future board meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Colbeck. Okay, Ms. Sells. Questions? Mr. Miller? Ms. Luzon? Nope. Ms. Prosser? Nope. Hassett?
Nope.
Timish?
I did, so it said that allows mobile device to wirelessly present, and I'm assuming that's both Android and iPhones will be able to.
No, right now it would be just for
The iPads, just-
Mac OS or a Windows device that's using Air Server or Reflector.
Okay, so when it said, like, allows a mobile device, so their iPads can do it, their Macs.
Mac OS or a Windows device that has Reflector or AirPlay installed.
Okay. But they wouldn't actually be able to use, like, if they brought their own technology.
On an Android, it would not allow that. That is one limitation of this.
Well, I'm sorry, Ms. Cox.
Okay, Mr. Miller, then I have a question.
So I think Ms. Timish brings up a good point, and I had a teacher ping me a few weeks ago, Brian, I didn't follow up with you, basically, why are we getting Apple TVs in the rooms when there's a ability to go through the PC for devices, which would give, as I understand it, not saying I have the answer, but I'm just relaying this, this this 1 to X thing that Cronda's talking about.
Yep.
Are we doing the right thing because some of this is about the students using their devices, even their preferred devices, to display. Are there no other options that are software based that we could be doing instead of rolling out another 900 devices that run about $300 or so?
I guess the answer to your question is this one works the best with the devices that we're using in our one-to-one program. So if you look at the Mac OS and iOS, this one consistently works the best. We've in the past have used Air Server, we've used Reflector, and they're a little bit more problematic. So looking at the number of devices that we have, and especially given the students that are in our one-to-one program the ability to share what they have on their screen, this is the best tool to do that effectively. So that's why we're recommending it.
So when I have a student who is, because you said one-to-one, and I think we're early.
With the district issued device is what I'm saying.
Has a Google Chromebook, because he or she doesn't have access to a issued device, he's limited then in this exercise.
Correct.
And I assume then the instructional environment would suggest that don't do an exercise that precludes one student that doesn't have a device from participating.
Yeah, or the workaround on that, especially with the Chromebook, everything is, it's web-based, so could you share the permissions to somebody else that has an iPad to then share it or put it up and share it to the teacher device and they can project it? There's other ways to work around that,
okay,
and that's typically how that's done.
Okay.
I think a lot of times they share it with the teacher who would then broadcast it.
Well, that's why, but the point then is that they don't probably need the Apple TV. The teacher can project, there can be ways for the teacher to project the screen that don't require the Apple TV.
If they're wired and connected, but right now, for example, if a teacher was set up in a spot that they weren't wired, essentially their MacBook, they can project it from anywhere in the room. So if a student had a Chromebook and they shared, let's say, a presentation or a Google Doc or something that they were working on a Chromebook, they could share the permissions to the teacher, and the teacher could present that wirelessly through their MacBook, or if they shared it with another student that had an iPad, they could share it wirelessly as well.
Okay. And that level of knowledge, do you think that that's prevalent at the campuses?
I think once they start using the Apple TV, it is, yeah.
Or the schools that have it.
Correct. And we do have some Apple TVs spread out through all the schools. It's just that some of them are like the early generation, Gen 1, Gen 2.
Like I have.
I have them too, and those are starting to be a little problematic as well. I think mine is, I think I have two of them. They're probably 7 or 8 years old already, and they lock up at times. So this is the one that works the most consistently with the technology that we have.
Great, thanks.
Ms. Lasan, questions? Well, I'm just going to go on the record. I'm disappointed as an Android user that we don't have accommodations for other equipment. So my point is heard.
But you're not really an Android
She's
user
not kidding.
right now.
Yeah, technically you are not an Android user right now.
Sorry. I'm a paper and pen girl right now. And a string can.
That's good.
Thank
So,
you.
thank you, Mr. Colbeck. Okay, Dr. Rogers, we're going to move into the internal audit discussion, and this was something called upon by Mr. Miller and Ms. Prosnick. So, Mr. Miller, after Dr. Rogers, will let you lead the discussion.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Cox. So, in board documents, you have really one of the things that I appreciate Mr. Miller and Ms. Prosnick when they approached me about this to give some time. And so, we did do some work as far as in board book regarding how prevalent are internal amongst our peers, and I think there's 15, if I've counted right, school districts that have internal auditors, and out of those, I mean, that we have listed, and 9 of the 15 have internal auditors. So we know that that's been a discussion in the past, particularly Ms. Prosnick and I've had that discussion for several years. And so there are, of course, board policies which I put in there, and of course our general counsel's statement on that, and I think y'all understand that. And upon the board's direction, all I would say is then if you choose to have a internal auditor that you want to contract with, it would require an RFQ. So with that, I'm going to punt it to Mr. Miller. Maybe.
He is trying to load his PowerPoint.
If we had an Apple TV, this would be going.
You wouldn't know how to do it. Only the kids know how to do it.
Yeah, I'd have to have a kid hook it up.
Here, you can have mine.
Does she want a minute to go with it?
No, I've got my own stash down there. Thank you.
Own stash.
I have that gum you like. No, thank you. I have that gum you like.
We're to the chocolate stage.
We're to the chocolate stage. The 3 stages of a meeting.
No.
Already had me going in chocolate.
The chocolate's back in the corner. I might go get some more for you guys.
She didn't mainline. She seems like an Yeah, where's Jeff? He could run across. He could get us snacks. He's home.
Well, we're gonna wing it a little bit because I don't have the actual presentation. I think I might have sent you guys,
Oh, that's right.
I got an email. Do you want? Can we email it to you?
well, is it in the email?
Why don't we just all open it and email?
That was in the email.
Yeah.
With our own devices.
The one that is the LASD format? Yeah.
The one that you emailed me today.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's in one day.
Yeah. It was.
Watch
there
me,
were
you
like
go.
7 documents.
This is
Yeah,
gonna
you
be.
did. That's why I brought my device, Tracy. Mr. Miller.
Yeah. So there's one that had a bunch, it's the first one I sent.
Who do I
don't
need
know
to
if
send
went
it
to
to?
Jamie.
Yeah.
Do I send to Jamie or do I
If
send it?
Angie or Jenny or Kevin would have had the one with,
I have it. So who
Okay.
do I send it to?
who can she send it to?
Which, is it not the ones you blind copied us on?
Yeah.
Did you get it? Good thing I don't have an Android.
Or you have a phone.
I do, but it's not.
Ron, is the one you got up the one LASD format?
Well, yeah,
Yes.
you sent internal audit, yeah, you did it.
Yeah, okay, yeah,
It's a PowerPoint.
This one right here?
yeah, that's it.
Yep.
That's it.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. We have it now?
I think everybody's got their device out and I can share it with Ms. Cox.
There we go.
Oh, there.
It's all big.
Okay, you guys want me to sit in the front?
Sure.
Sure, Tracy.
Oh, okay.
I won't. I'm
think you
gonna
wanna
stay
sit-
right
I'm
here.
just kidding, but I'm gonna sit over here like that.
Need to call upon you, Mr. Miller.
Okay, Ms. President Cox and Dr. Rogers, thanks for letting us talk about this item. We'll try and do this in about 5-7 minutes of discussion maybe, and then,
Okay, I'm setting
Catherine,
the time.
10 minutes discussion, and then, I forgot I was gonna have Jenny talk
Give
too.
you 3 minutes.
Jenny.
You only-
You
Hassan's only giving you 3.
30 seconds.
So I'm going to read the objective here just to make sure we're on the same page, but it just is an element of background. So the state requires that we have a policy called CFC Legal, which is a policy that we're required to have an audit function. That's the audit of our financials, essentially our CAFR. In about 2006, about the time that the business world started looking at Sarbanes-Oxley, the Education Code came out and said that there were some provisions that you could have internal audit functions. The reason the government went to this for public entities was around having certain internal controls and policies. It could be number of records in, number of records out, counts and amounts, invoices, etc. But this is where a lot of this stemmed from, having some of these audit functions. This is not intended to be an internal auditor where we would have staff, a resident within LISD, that are essentially auditing their peers. This is an external audit function, and we'll read the basis for some of that. Dr. Rogers provided you some background with some of the school districts around. You'll see some use internal auditors, some don't, and we'll talk about some of the variances. But to gain board approval to create so the purpose of this item for next week is to vote on having an internal policy, an internal audit function. That is a function that would be selected by and report to the board, and we'll go through what that looks like a little later on. But to create a local board policy for internal audit that establishes an external independent internal audit policy and procedures to look at efficiencies, risks, and other beneficial outcomes around programs, topics, or functions. In addition, this would establish a framework for continuous improvement in key areas, topics, or programs. While the objective of this item is to get approval to write the policy would include the objective, selection process, reporting structure, and subcommittee. We'll talk about that. The internal auditor would administratively and functionally report to the board with some administrative oversight from the superintendent and our staff as established in the policy. And we'll explain what happens when a policy is, when an audit is done, and how that, the staff's not surprised by it and that type of thing. Did you want to make any comments from here? No. I got you in this. Okay, background. So I'll let Jenny kind of give her.
Well, the background kind of came from, I went to an SL, as all things come from SLI. I went to an SLI session on internal auditors. It was actually my first year on the board. Came in, and I then, when I had my one-on-one with Dr. Rogers, I mentioned it, and I mentioned it again the following year, and mentioned again the following year. And I would tell you that I see an internal auditor as part of a growth mindset that we ask of our staff, and is a growth mindset that we ask of our principals and our leaders. This is about being better. I often say the best thing about education is that you can always be better. The worst thing about education is that you never get there. And that can be the same to be said for our systems and our functions. The presentation that I saw happened to be for Fort Bend ISD, and it was done on their payroll. And what they discovered, it wasn't about saving them millions of dollars, but what they did discover is that they were not using their talent efficiently, that that it was more about efficiency, that they were doing some things twice, which does tie into our cornerstone of resource stewardship, and not just that treasure part, but that time part and the talent part. I think that we review our programs, we evaluate them, and I don't see this as being any different in doing that when it comes to our systems and our processes. We need to be fluid and not static. I think that an outside person looking in is always good. I think you can get caught in your bubble and think that we've done it this way forever. That was something that Fort Bend ISD discovered when they did it. And once again, they selected just their payroll, and they have a schedule for their internal, external auditor, because they do contract it out, so that they are constantly looking at systems to make sure that they are being the most efficient that they can be. That would be my background
Yeah, great. There's a tendency when people think internal audit, they think finance, and so we're not using that word because this is not about necessarily a finance thing. Audit probably tends to fit in most enterprises in finance, I would assume, because finance is the guardian of those things. But this has the ability under policy to do more than just look at financials. So what is an audit? The official definition of internal audit from the Institute of Internal Audit states the internal auditing is an independent objective assurance of consulting activities designed to add value and improve an organization's operations. It helps an organization accomplish its objectives by bringing a systematic, disciplined approach to evaluate and improve the effectiveness of risk management, control, and governance. That's the definition. Here's what I put in here. In past years, state law was silent to the role of the internal auditor in public schools. In 2006, however, the legislature passed TEC Section 11.170, which states that if school district employs an internal auditor, the Board of Trustees selects the internal auditor, and the internal auditor reports directly to the board. We, quote, we currently only have, that's a quote, I'm sorry. That is from the article that Dr. Rogers sent you. We currently only have an LISD external audit policy as required by Education Code 44.08 and CFC Legal. Most districts, or many, searched, and you'll find them go both ways, have some form of a local internal policy audit. Now, by the way, they don't all, as Dr. Rogers shared with you, but we'll talk about why maybe that's important. In other words, all school audits begin in this context and end with the school board, which both initiates the internal audits and reviews their audits. An internal audit is a way for the school board to effectively execute their oversight responsibilities through an independent and objective lens. An external audit tells if our financials are accurate. An internal audit tells if our systems and processes are working properly. External audit looks beyond solely our financial results and should include school activity funds such as, or as well as academic, operational, and administrative evaluations. Now, what it is not. So the objective is not a gotcha. It's not for any of the 8 non-elected people here at the table that there's a sense that there's a problem in a certain area. This is putting in place what is considered to be, even by the education agency, but others, a good, effective means for the board to execute its duties and to do it in an objective way. So it's no gotcha. It's not established or recommended because there's a specific problem. It's not an intent to stir up issues, and it's not targeted at any particular department, function, or individual. However, those of you who were here under Dr. Waddell and read a lot of the books he had you read, and even some of the books that have been read by staff recently, disruption is a new term, right? Disruption is a term that businesses are using to say, we've got to be more innovative, we've got to think differently, we've got to have a continuous improvement process, and to do that, we have to have some disruption. And all I'm doing is putting the context here. While this is a very friendly effort, there will be some disruption. We may look at a process we've done for a long time. We'll say that with the legislature, they've got a formula that is established in 1984, a finance formula, right? Well, there may be some processes we've done for the last 15, 20 years because we've already done them, and it might make sense to look at them. 2 meaningful things that we did, there's a third we're doing. One was the GT audit that was initiated by Dr. Waddell and staff. That could have fallen under this process, but it was initiated by him, and the communications audit, which both brought material findings to the board, ultimately. And the third is our efficiency audit here. One of the things you could do an internal audit is an efficiency audit on a number of things, but I would say, for example, what Dr. Rapp and Dr. Colburn are doing with the efficiency study would be considered an efficiency audit, if you will, because they're looking at staff utilization at campuses, et cetera. But again, an efficiency audit might sit outside of this, but could be brought into it. Does that make sense? This is not anything but looking at some of the best recommendations that are out there. TASB really recommends this as well. However, as you know,
Clicker.
has happened in
Well, that was your 10 minutes, I'm sorry.
no, as has happened with other district-initiated audits, it has the potential of creating healthy disruption, which is commonly used in the modern economy of business for the benefit of improved outcomes and efficiencies. The value is in demonstrating to the community that the school board is fulfilling its oversight function by enlisting independent and objective assessment of all school systems, operations, and programs, and identifying operations for improvement. An effective internal audit function can also protect board members and administrators by addressing issues before they become a problem. Just like we put together the CAB to look at new items, and I'm not there yet. I'm talking to this slide. It's tough to be in this spot. I'll tell you what. Kudos to you guys. You probably don't get as much coaching though. Anyway, made me lose my train of thought. The objective. The district shall support an internal audit program. Now, this kind of sounds like legalese because it came out of some policy framework, but it's not meant to write the policy. The district shall support an internal audit program for the purposes of providing an independent, objective evaluation of systems, departments, projects, and plans. The function may also provide consulting activities, like an efficiency study, designated to add value and improve the efficiency and effectiveness of district operations. These activities are also known as operational audits. The objective of internal audit is to assist the board and the district in the effective discharge of their responsibilities. To this end, internal auditing furnishes them with the analysis, appraisals, recommendations, and information concerning the activities reviewed. The audit objective includes promoting effective control at reasonable cost. I don't think I need to get into the scope because you can read that, and I think the scope could vary based on what we decide to do. Independence, I think I've already made the point that the recommendation here is that the independence is that it is a outside party. The policy will have in it the actual sourcing criteria. I mean, most of the standard templates have this is what you do to source these people. You don't source them on price because they're professional services, right? So, a recommendation would be that if we source someone, if we establish the policy, we source someone, then we put an audit committee together that's 3 members of the board that would look at perhaps a risk assessment. That would look at, working with staff, 15, 20 areas. They would then kind of look at those areas, score them based on 9 weighted factors, and come up with a set of profiles. That set of profiles could be you just do one project and you're done. It could be that you have some districts have a 5-year plan, and they would say, okay, we finished this here, and let's move on to the next one. The readout, I think this is important, and I think this is really important. So while this has a function of reporting to the board via the committee, the audit committee, really the recommendations that come from Gibson, and they were the ones in the article there, they're the only ones that are endorsed by, there are others that do this, but they're an affiliate of TASB, is that the first readout of the audit is done with the staff, and that's taking a look at kind of the subjective, factual data. Here's what we used, here's what we found. Do you disagree with any of this? Is this slanted? That's before it even comes to the audit committee. Then the audit committee has a chance to look at it, and then there's some discussions with staff, and then ultimately the board would take a look at it at the predefined duration. But it is I never got the sense in talking to anybody that this was anything more than a very amicable approach. However, it's the opposite where you have internal audit, which might get perceived to be, they're trying to catch you on, $3 expense item or something like that. There are different types of audits, and you guys have these, so I'm not going to, because I'm burning out my time. And then what would the next steps be? The item next week is really for the board to decide to put together, to have a local audit policy. That would be CFC local, because CFC legal is the CAFR. So we would put together a policy. It would have in it how we're going, what I think I sent you guys some drafts, but there's a template around the kind of purpose, the value, et cetera, how you would hire. There's recommendations on how you're going to select somebody, and then how you appoint the committee. A lot of this is already laid out by many districts. But that's what we would be voting on next week, that we're going to move in the direction of having an internal audit function. Now, after that, I assume Jeff would write the policy.
Tasby's going to have something. We'd start.
Oh, Tasby, yeah, and we would have the policy written, and it would come back to the board for approval. And then upon approval, I assume the board president and Dr. Rogers could work on who are the right board members to be. I mean, the board presidents, because it's the board, but with cooperation from Dr. Rogers, assign a committee of 3. There would be a chairman of the audit committee, just because normal interactions don't require 3 to speak to 1 consultant, but just that's kind of the way it's set up. And then my recommendation, once we get there, this is a little premature, is to do a risk assessment. I had in here efficiency study, because you see a lot of that, but that would be like, we've got a program today that we should do, and we jump into it. This is just setting up the framework for it. And so then once you do the risk assessment, you may not do anything. You may set up the policy and not do anything for a while. It just depends. And then ultimately, if we did the risk assessment or whatever, we'd make the recommendation to the board, and that just sets the framework for moving forward in the future. I think it fits well within the current environment we're in, with our community and with the legislature. And there are plenty of proof cases as procurement goes out and starts to talk to people of monies that were saved or monies that were found in certain areas that recover your costs of the audit.
Mr. Miller, so on the legal draft policy, really you're really talking about local policy, right? Because you're talking about
I meant legal should draft the
will
policy.
draft. Okay, so
right.
I got you.
I know. I mean, there's templates and
I got you. Yeah. Okay, I just wanted to
have legal.
Yeah, gotcha.
And I just want to echo something Mr. Miller said at the end. This doesn't mean necessarily that we would do an audit, an external audit. That board committee could or come to with a recommendation to do one or to not do one at all. All we are doing with this is establishing local policy. That's all.
Yeah, and so this is a question for Jeff. If really the first step, which I think is the right first step, is to create the policy before, even the committee's chosen,
right.
Then really there's we just need to hear from the board. We don't have to take action to give you authority to create the policy. We need to have him create the policy and bring that forward for y'all to approve to start this sort of gear in motion. Am I right on that?
Okay, Mr. Miller. Thank you, Mr. Miller, for a great presentation. I presume you don't have any questions.
Not at this time.
This is on.
That just caught me as comical. Are you sure I'm the one that's supposed to start?
Mr. Miller.
Mr. Miller was supposed to start.
Okay, I wasn't prepared to start, but okay. So, I have lots of thoughts on this. I have notes myself, Mr. Miller, and they are not in, your typical post-it format, but, so there's nothing, per what you just said, there's nothing we really need to vote on next week, because all we would be doing is giving Mr. Crownover authorization to start writing a policy.
To research and really get from TASB some guidelines, because as Mr. Miller said, there's already a lot of school districts that have the policy, so you don't have to start from scratch. And then once we have it ready, we just present it to the board for y'all to approve the policy, and that would really start the mechanism.
So my initial thoughts on this, I feel like I probably have a more extensive internal audit background than most because I am married to one, and so I try to pay attention and listen to what he does. But so overall, I don't think this is a bad thing. However, for us, I'm not sure that it's the time for us to have this now. I think that if there was a change in leadership, either Mr. Ball or Dr. Rogers, if they left, I think that would be a good time to do internal audit. However, if you're talking about just doing a policy, I would hope that somewhere in the policy, I'm not completely against that, but I would think that if we did have something in place, I would not want it to be mandatory that we did internal audit every year. You know, I would hope that it would say something along the lines of, if the board saw fit to do that, something along those lines.
Okay, some flexibility.
Yeah, major flexibility.
Okay.
And because of that, I won't get into all the other reasons at the moment.
Yeah, that's fine.
My thoughts, but anyway.
Anything else?
Not at the moment, but I reserve the right to.
To close.
Ms. Prosnick?
Well, you know, I agree. I like the idea of the flexibility, and that's always been the idea that the board would have the flexibility whether they wanted to seek one. I guess what I disagree on is I believe that no matter who your leadership is, that you can always find ways to do things better, and that using this to do the services and functions that we do, if someone could come in and tell us a better way to do it that could possibly save us money or time or talent, I'm very open to that. I don't think that has to happen when there's a leadership change. I think that can happen at any time in an organization such as ours, which is one of the reasons that, you know, I wanted our ability to do this. Once again, it doesn't mean that we have to do it or have to have an external, internal audit on something. I like the idea of outsourcing it so that we could choose exactly what it is we wanted to have looked at, what processes, what systems, the risk assessment that Mr. Miller spoke of. I just think that, you know, we talk about a growth mindset, and that's what a growth mindset is, making things better and making sure you're not standing in concrete.
And Ms. Prosnick, first off, I don't disagree at all. Even with an auditor, doesn't mean you have to implement what they.
Absolutely.
You know, I mean, they can come up with a list of 10 things that you're not bound to implement those things.
Right.
You know, I just want to make that point.
I'm very much in agreement with this. I actually had brought it up myself when I asked Mrs. Cox on April 10th of 2017, the same meeting that we discussed and approved the e-notification, signing up for board member, brought both of these issues up. There was a little bit more hesitance to adopt the internal audit at that time. Evidently, I also did not explain it very well when I had discussed it. Didn't have a PowerPoint that you could barely read the words of way over here. Just bugging you, Mr. Miller. I think this is a very good way to make sure that our processes are using our staff time efficiently, because that's really what they're for. Austin ISD also does audits, and they have a whole list on their website: accounts payable, facilities program audit, which is a good one, food service audit, human resource audit, special education audit, technology audit. They have a whole list of things that they currently do on not every year. They do them on a scheduled basis. I think I also brought up the GT and communications audit, which gained us a lot of good information on how to improve our processes, which is probably how it then devolved into a program audit, which I still love. Thank you very much for that. I'm in strong disagreement of using a subcommittee. strong disagreement in using a subcommittee. We've just gone away from that. We don't discuss things well, and if this is a whole board audit, it needs to be a whole board discussion without using a subcommittee. So that's my only other thing.
The reason for the committee is that the external entity can't interface with 7 people legally, and so it's a buffer, right? So I hear what you're saying, but there's almost nobody that does this that doesn't have a committee that is a liaison, but not a liaison. I mean, ultimately, it's to share everything, but they've got to have somebody they bounce things by because they report to the board. So the mechanics of reporting to the board.
If there are other options.
If there are other options, then yeah. I mean,
I'll also look around for him too.
what's that?
I'll also look around for some options.
Yeah, I'm sure you will.
And so, in the present, thank you so much for your presentation, Ms. Brodnick and Mr. Miller. I appreciate it. The question I had is, in the presentation, it seemed to be that there was an assumption that there's going to be we're going to have an external auditor, and I just want to know if we can have a discussion about being an internal auditor. I mean, because if you count up there, 8 of them, and the districts that have them have an internal auditor, and some have it outsourced. So I'm just wondering, when we do create the policy, is that drafted in a way? Do we need to make the decision of if it's just an auditor that comes in and does something specific, or is it an internal auditor that becomes a staff member?
Yeah, great question. I don't think the new policy would limit that it had to be an external source for an internal auditor, or you wanted to hire an LISD employee. I mean, I think certainly that's still on the table for the board to decide.
And I'm sorry, I couldn't hear what you said.
So you can draft it however you want. I mean, you can.
Well,
set
I'm
it
just
up.
asking if we're drafting it up. I just wanted to know.
The intent is to not have it be an internal auditor, and that was because of some conversations that preceded this, that there was some hesitance around an internal audit function could create more friction. And so I think the way to compromise on this, and in discussions we had, was that this would be an external function. There are groups that do, as Dr. Rogers highlighted, I think Frisco does a hybrid model, or maybe not. Allen. Fort Bend used to do a hybrid model. They now they're solely outsourced, and they move that person to activity funds, and that's all the person manages. But I think that, as Christy mentioned, she raised this a while ago, there's some apprehension that there's probably more buy-in if it's an external auditor.
Okay, so I have a question. So it's a buy-in of the board, because the board's making the decision.
No, buy-in of staff.
So they don't feel like there's a gotcha, that there's somebody lurking around the building.
But I still feel like that needs to be internal, outsourced, needs to be a discussion at the board level. I mean, I just feel like it's a decision that's I don't know who's making that decision. Sounds like it's already been made, but I feel like that maybe needs to look at a conversation with the board of whether or not we want to outsource it or it's an internal model. I mean, I just feel like that's, if we're going to talk about this, I think that needs to be a board discussion.
The policy can be written to.
I understand how the policy can be written. I'm just saying it feels like we've already made a decision on how.
That was the recommendation.
That was
given to
because.
us. That was the recommendation given to
from
us.
Staff.
From staff.
Okay, thank you. I missed that piece, because I just wanted to make sure, because I've also been doing my homework, and so, and I do understand like some of the subcommittees, but from the districts that I've talked to as well, like, it's really the board that's giving the directive to the auditor and having the conversation with the auditor, because I also concur with Ms. Hassett. I really want to make sure that we're not having 3 people make decisions that then, four other people don't have the information for on the subcommittee, and I get that there's legal parts to it, but I know that when we've had subcommittees, then 4 other people, we end up being in a committee meeting twice, because everybody wants the same information. So I just want to make sure that we really look at what the opportunities are, so everybody's engaged in the process.
I think we could, what we need to do is decide if we're going to have a policy. Jeff can write that policy, we can approve that policy. But I think on something like this, remember, when you're managing an external entity that reports to the board, they have to have a small group that they meet with. That does not mean the rest
Why
of the
do they
board.
have to? Is it in law?
Well, it's just impractical for them to meet on
They can't come to a board meeting?
well, sure, yeah, they can come to a board meeting, then we're in the middle of the audit, and what we're gonna do is, in public, we're gonna have a discussion about the audit, and that kind of violates the whole premise of, you see, the board decides on what's gonna be audited. The liaison of that is the board, is the committee. This is what most everybody's put together, right? And I know you don't like it, but that's what most everybody's put together.
I know.
And in that governance model. And so in order to get things done quickly, that's who they go to. But they're working under the direction of what the board has decided to select. Just, I think we can look at, maybe Dr. Rogers can talk to people, or we can, do our own research on what happens, and talk to consulting companies. What happens if there is no subcommittee? Is it even practical to get it done? Because we might void the whole benefit by not having this committee. And all that committee's charge is to do is to be a liaison for the auditor.
They'll get more information.
And I would just ask that you just allow Jeff to do the research on that. What are the options? And then he can report back to y'all.
And that's
Hey,
what I
it's
just
not an
appreciate.
option. Yeah.
That just is, because I just want to make sure that it sounds like we've already made some decisions, and I just wanted
No
to make
decision.
sure. Is we're writing.
There's no decisions have been made.
Okay, but
this is just
okay, but
my
as I was hearing
recommendation.
it, there was some. I just want to make sure as we're writing the policy that it's flexible, and I do know that on with some of the auditors, there are some things that can be discussed in closed session because you are talking about staff, or you are talking. Right. So there are some options.
You can do some stuff in
Right.
closed
Jeff
session.
will
You
be,
can do some.
Jeff will, we've discussed a little bit of that. Jeff will be able to address that. But no decisions were made. The only thing that was discussed, again, there has been some hesitation on staff for an internal audit function. That's why we focused tonight on an external audit function that would have kind of a independent view and not be getting into, one department getting into another department's business. Would have a different.
Yeah, and Ms. Timish, just to be clear, and just on the verbiage, it wasn't a recommendation of staff, but it was a preference that if this is the plan, then this is certainly the preference we would have, is to have an external. I mean, we're not opposed to the idea at all. I mean, and I see some benefit in it, which is what I've written in the emails and so on. So, but we didn't come up with the recommendation, but we did come up with, hey, this is very much our preference in the system, so.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. I did
Yeah.
not know that piece of it.
Yeah.
Ms. Sells?
So has anybody, I'm not against the policy, and I would like Crown over to go ahead and research that. What is the estimated cost of this?
It depends on the kind of audit you want to do. I'm just going to relay a conversation that I had. Conversation that I had with someone from Gibson, right? Is it Gibson?
Yeah.
With Gibson was, I said, what does this cost, right? So if you have someone on staff, it can be anywhere from $100,000 to $110,000 if you had a full-time person. If you do, the one that she talked about was payroll and procurement. It's usually done together, and I don't know why. She said that can run anywhere for our size of district, and this is a ballpark.
It costs a ballpark?
Well, sure, a very small ballpark of about $40,000 to $55,000. Now, that was an estimate in a hallway at SLI. I don't want to make that's the standard, but that was what she said. If that helps you. But once again, we would have to decide that that's what we wanted to do. Does that make sense?
And just a reminder, Ms. Sells, when you do an RFQ, you can't ask for price up front. Now, to give you an idea, I asked Dr. Rapp to be prepared for this. So, Lori, do you know what we spent on the previous?
The special education audit was $40,309, and the GT audit was $138,420. The range in price, based on the RFP that was done at that time for those audits, anywhere from 40,000 to upwards of 192,000 from the vendors that responded to the RFPs.
And some of the increased costs, correct me if I'm wrong, Lori, on like the GT one, is the number of people in the community and teachers and
So
parents
with
you're
the,
gonna talk
yes,
to.
so the increased cost with the GT was we were very specific that we wanted them to visit schools and do a certain number of focus groups. And so the more schools they visited, the more focus groups they held, the more time, the more cost that
And
created.
so, that request that we would send out, would it be for the initial study and then follow up to determine
No.
change, or that
Mike,
would be a
you-
separate?
No,
You
you would
wanna-
do as Mr. Russo, you do kind of like a risk assessment is the best.
Well, what you,
Well,
first
you
of all, we
hire
would
someone
select,
based
we
on
would
their
select, first of all, we'd
qualifications,
select
right?
someone based on just the same we do with a CAFR. We don't hire someone based on their price, or law firm, we hire them based on their, because that's what the government code requires. Then, we would sit with them and talk about what the options are. And then we would look at, okay, as a risk assessment, this amount of money. You know, one vendor, for example, is doing 3 major audits right now, in studies really is the best way to look at them, under internal audit for a district 25% larger than ours for around $300,000. That's 3 major ones for a much larger district, and there's much more interactions. The communication study we did, I believe that Dr. Rapp probably doesn't have visibility to, was about $100,000. For those of us who were here in the days of the GT study and the communication study, they were amazingly valuable to the district. There's still things that we can pull from those. Now, the other thing is, it's a fair question of the company we select, is that we would like to focus on some areas that, based on your experience, have given a quick ROI to show us that, you know, we want to do a project and we'd like it to self-fund. What are areas that you've seen that happen? And so they'll talk about certain student activity funds or reimbursements from TEA or food service funds that they've got money, you know, found ways for the districts to get more money, and those are just some examples of things to do. But again, you know, it's a risk assessment has the most value because then it gives the board, in executing our governance, an opportunity to look at it and say, where are the within school systems, right, and programs and topics, where's the biggest impact in Texas public schools. And so that, I don't know what a risk assessment would cost, but that's a recommended thing to look at. Those are some rough costs, and again, they're all over the map. I mean, the special ed, you know, that was $40-some thousand, right? That's a small amount of money for probably the value that delivered. Gifted and talented, I could tell you, given the public sentiment at the time, that study was done really, really well, and we gained a lot of insight that I think reshaped much of not just the department, but the way we're doing things, right?
Yeah, and I would say on the difference with the gifted and talented audit, it took staff almost the whole year working with the company on the documentation, the data, the questions of the focus group. So depending on the elements of your audit, depends on the amount of staff time as well, because staff was the one that sent out all the information to the focus groups and got the people scheduled, and so that's just, whereas at the special ed audit, they provided all the data, so staff was gathering all the data for the special ed audit. There wasn't the focus groups and the school walks with the staff, but those are some differences.
Yeah, so
there
I
as
think
well.
that that's important information. So it's not that no staff will be involved, they'll be interviewed and that type of thing, but again, you know, look at our MO, right? We talk about a growth mindset. We've brought the C back in to look at almost anything. We're looking at, if we have an internal audit function, to look at areas as we discharge our duties that might be valuable for us in either efficiency or savings. That's what we're looking at here. And we may put this together and, it's optics. We have a policy on it, and we can execute on it anytime we want. And we may decide that the timing of executing on that is not in August, right? But it does give us the opportunity to, again, if you look at any policy that's written along those lines, it will talk about helping the board and discharging its duties. And that's really what this is about, in partnership with the administration.
Well, thank you for sitting on that side of the table for once, but I'm going to echo Ms. Timish and Ms. Hassett's. I am not a fan of the subcommittee. So even in the code here, it says shall report directly to the board, and I think that's the only way that I would support, is if there was a way that that external auditor could come back to the board directly as a whole to have those discussions. So.
Anything else? Okay, so I am in full favor of putting it in the language for the internal audit, but I think Mr. Crownover, it all goes in, as I'm hearing from actually 100% of the board, it's all about the language, because I'm with Ms. Lazant. I don't want the board to feel like every year we have to do an audit on something. I wouldn't want that, so I think it needs to be very vague. It goes to Ms. Timish's point of external, internal. I think there needs to be an open opportunity when we're all not on the board, or there gives the board opportunities for that. Maybe there is an internal candidate that might be, want to do that. I definitely would not be in favor right now of an internal audit, because there's a lot of questions that I have, because even though, you say they're not gotcha moments, I think it can be perceived that way, because obviously since I've been on the board, every one of our audits has stemmed from either a complaint or a concern of something in the district that has triggered that audit to be done. So I would definitely want cooperation from the district of, hey, we're seeing some challenges that would call the board to do the audit. So it's more of a partnership and not more of the board going, we've heard complaints from parents, so now we want this to happen. I mean, it's, we're in this together as a partner and a team, and that's how that we work together. So that would be my only concern and comment on there. And then, in fact, of course, the final thing would be the implementation. We've done several audits, and some things have been implemented that have come from the audits, and other things I've seen have not come from the audits. And as you've heard from Dr. Rapp, some of these audits are not very cheap. They are expensive, and that's the cost of a teacher. And so I look at a lot of that too when we're thinking about expenditures.
So those are great.
I was hoping I got to say one more thing about when Dr. Rapp was talking. You're talking about costs. Not only are we paying a firm, but you're talking about staff costs that's taken away from their everyday duties. Because when an auditor comes in, they come and they get in their business, and they're going to have access to data. They're going to have access to the buildings. They're going to, it's time taken away from our already very busy, staff. So that's one thing that I think about heavily. And
yeah, I think that's a great point, and I think if it's a dominant point on the board, we will never do this. We just won't. We will work in a world where the board doesn't initiate and have full responsibility for the audits. We would just sit back and let staff tell us what they want to do and let them make some risk assessments. And so I think that's an important thing to understand. It is going to take some of their time. But this is a different mindset. This is about the board being responsible for this and initiating it. And then the actions that come out of that, the studies we did, like to your point, Ms. Cox, the studies we've done, those weren't to the board. I mean, they went out in a report, they gave us a readout, but after that, it's up to the staff to do whatever. It's not the board initiating a study. And so I think that, again, this is a mindset change. And it is definitely something that I think the public would look at. And quite frankly, there's some legislation on certain things that if we had this in place, we could execute more quickly because we'd have it in place. An efficiency study, as an example, would be one of those things to think about. The other thing is, the nice thing about these are you could have somebody do this for a year, do one study, and then next year you don't do anything. If you do an internal auditor, you're hiring an employee. And so you don't have start, stop. And why is it that Fort Bend they had a hybrid, right? And their internal auditor is now not doing internal audit other than the student activities fund because they're an employee. You can't just get rid of them. And so you could have them do something for a year, not do anything, bring them back later, you know, it's just up to the board, how do you do that?
But the board can make that decision.
The board would be the ones to make that decision, that's right.
Okay, no further questions? Thank you, Mr. Miller. Ms. Brosnick? Okay, now we're gonna move into, the legislative update. Mr. Miller, which will be you'll be making for the next board meeting. So did you wanna make any comments or be prepared to make that presentation at the board meeting?
I'll make that board meeting.
Okay, is there any other business?
HB3 was discussed
Do you wanna
on the
talk
Senate
about
floor.
that?
I didn't listen to all of the amendments. I did listen to quite a few. I did not hear an amendment removing the language for prior years. I'm sure it was probably in there, but while I was listening, it wasn't discussed, so I don't know if it's still in HB3. For start date, the Senate added start date to a school finance bill. And that amendment to remove the start date failed, so start date will still be the third, fourth, August 26th next year. That is still in HB3. The merit pay and outcomes-based funding is still in HB3. Start audit was actually put as an amendment, so now we're having, I didn't see the language because it was, the students are still subjected to high stakes during this time, but the audit itself is in there, so that's one step closer. I didn't watch all day, so those are just a few of the nuggets that I remember, but we should be able to all see a recap tonight and tomorrow.
Thank you, Ms. Brosnick. Is there anything else? Ms. Hazzard? Ms. Brosnick, I'm looking at you.
Tomato, tomato.
Ms. Hazzard, sorry, it's a late night. Okay, if there's no further business, this meeting is adjourned and the time is now 10:20.